Today I'm super pumped and excited to have my brother James Hill, founder of Hairbust, who you guys just sold recently to JD Fashion and Sport Group, a 12 billion market cap public company listed on the FTSE. So James is the kind of guy who you don't hear much talking, but who achieved much more than most people will actually ever achieve in life, and he's only 33. As a proof of that, he was already financially free before even selling his company a few months ago. So today we'll talk about a lot of different topics, starting a business, bringing it to the next level and selling it to a huge group, of course. But we'll also talk about investing, retiring early, crypto, education, and a bunch of other super cool topics that James excels at. Thank you so much for doing this, man.
You're welcome. Looking forward to it.
Yes. So let's start directly with, before starting the questions, can you give us a context on what Hairbust is and what happened recently, so we have a good context before diving deeper into the conversation?
Yeah, sure. So Hairbust is a cosmetics company. So we sell predominantly hair care products. We started off selling online, so we quite big on social media. So I think in total our social media pages are like 1.2, 1.3 million followers now. So e-commerce is like 50% of the business, and then we have our retail side. So we sell into 20,000 stores across the world, mostly Europe, America and Asia. So everywhere pretty much now. So 20,000 store groups.
Awesome. And can you tell us what happened recently?
So we, it was a long process, but when we built the business, it was all bootstrapped, so we never raised any money. We started with £4,000 when we started the business. Never raised any money along the way. After 9 years of doing that, we decided to exit a majority share. So we sold it to, in the end, it was JD.
Okay, perfect. So now that we have the context that's basically set up, can you tell us who you are and talk to us about your background even before Hairbust, and then we'll talk about basically the Hairbust story. But start first before Hairbust. Before
Hairbust, okay. I'm just a pretty normal guy from North Leeds, which you keep reminding me with my accent. So I grew up in a town called Scunthorpe, which is about an hour from Leeds. I did go to university, but I studied sport because I was always interested in sport, and that's what I thought I wanted to do. But I quickly realised within the first few weeks of starting university that in order to have a full life, let's say, or a fully enjoyable life, then it's quite important to get some level of financial assets behind you. So quite early on when I started uni, I decided I wanted to build a business. I didn't actually know what that was ever going to be. I never expected it to be in hair care. And I did a lot of things before Hairbust to try and find money, I guess, between like playing poker to selling things on eBay, selling things on Amazon. I kind of built up a background in selling online, I guess, to be able to launch Hairbust successfully when we did.
Can you detail a bit more what you did on Amazon, what you tried, if it kind of worked, didn't work? Like, what's the basically takeaway of like this Amazon experience, and when is that, so people can kind of contextualize the time?
Yeah. So I'll go back. So during university, it was playing poker. So that was actually a really big part of what I did because it taught me to think mathematically, I guess. So, I'm sure we'll get onto this, but in terms of like launching a business, whether it's e-com or in crypto or anything, I think just a base understanding of like finances and mathematics is really useful. And I actually gained that through playing poker, which is not a normal route to go, but that was relatively successful. So I made some money doing that. And then I did a lot of travel after university while I was playing poker. And then the start of the e-commerce stuff was I had a job at a phone shop, and I used to sell phones on eBay. So I used to buy second-hand phones and then resell them on eBay when I knew I could make a profit. So I did that for about 7 or 8 months, and that's how I started selling things online. Yeah.
What did you do with the poker money? Did you just use it to travel? Did you start investing already? Like what was the mindset or the goal?
So our goal was always freedom, really. This is I was super young now. This is like when I was like 19. So I knew some people who are quite successful playing poker, and I was like interested in it. And I always like playing games and playing sport, and I kind of just saw it as that. And I think poker often gets confused with gambling when actually it's a game of skill. And there's luck involved as well, but I had a pretty good win rate across like the 3 or 4 years I did that. So I was able to earn consistent money every month. And I wasn't investing yet. My goal was to save money so then I could go traveling to Thailand and Bali and places like that. So that's what I did that was ultimately the goal, because I knew if I could get just like a steady income through anything that was remote or on my laptop, then I could travel. That was literally the goal then.
Okay, and that's in the early 2010s.
Yeah, after uni, so that's like 2010, 2011.
Okay, yeah, because I kind of don't really remember that time. Maybe I was a bit too young. I don't know, but like it seems that it's actually pretty early on that you understood that this entire remote life and remote work thing.
Yeah. So that was how I'm trying to think where that came around from. I mean, it was kind of, so two of my good friends who actually were founders in Hairburst with me, we was at university, and it was always a thing where you finish uni and you go traveling. Doesn't mean it wasn't about that, but even then it was more like you save money, you go traveling, but you then just come back and get a job. Mm-hmm. It was like a gap that people found, like a 6-month gap. Whereas for me, if I could get away to work on my laptop, I could do it longer. That was basically the plan. Just do it longer, you know? So I needed to find a way to get income, and like people, I guess, would work at bars or whatever. But because I found the poker thing and I really wanted to have that as a career at the time, it was on the laptop and I understood I could do it elsewhere. So I thought that was really cool.
Where do you think this mindset is coming from? Like, is it coming from, you know, because there is, as you say, there is like the people who think I'm just going to finish my studies, then I'm going to go travel and enjoy and go crazy. But then, you know, the normal life is you go back to your village or your country and you work. Like, did you have some kind of, you know, do you have some kind of anxiety about that, about feeling stuck in one place? Or did you just say, I don't know, where do you feel like this longer term thinking already at that age is coming from? Because there's no reason why you should stop after 6 months. There's no reason why you should just come back to your normal life and do what everybody's doing.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't know where that initial mindset came from, but I do know that when I went traveling the first time, I realized you could stay in a nice hotel in Thailand for like £10 a night with aircon, and you got a shower, and that was enough, you know. So that was like that cemented it for me. And but before that, I guess it was, I think I probably had a bit of anxiety around just not making the most of life. So I still have that mindset today, and that's kind of how I live my life for the last 10 years, is just trying to make the most of it. And there's lots of things that have happened over the last 5-10 years that have like cemented that in my mind, is just like trying to enjoy my time as much as I can. But it really kicked on when I did that trip, and I realized you could live without that much money, actually. Things have obviously changed now, but and I read the book, The 4 Hour Work Week, which I talk a lot about, but it's not about working 4 hours a week. It was more about the fundamentals of e-commerce that were displayed in that book was like really useful to me. I mean, this book was written in, I'm definitely going to get this wrong, probably 2008 or something. So like the stuff that's in that book now is outdated, but in terms of like core principles on working on your laptop, build an e-commerce business, like how the world's becoming decentralized. This is like back then. It's obviously accelerated now hugely, but from an e-commerce perspective, that was a big book for me, and it really cemented what I thought is what I'd want to do with my life. Part of it anyway. Awesome.
So, I mean, before we talk about the Hairbust story, so basically the kind of takeaway from this part, and that we'll basically get back to afterwards, is this realization that you actually don't need that much money to live a decent life, because you can move around. And this should basically lower the anxiety or the stress of most people who are stuck in their place and think they need to make it there. They need to make, I don't know how much money per month or per year. While if you just literally take a suitcase, go somewhere else, you can live with 10 times less money. And actually, it's not just, I mean, going to Thailand is not necessarily just for holidays. And like that's something that, I mean, I think it's more and more people are starting to think like that, but still based on, I don't know, culture or like what your parents think of you or all that stuff. Like we feel like we need to grow or develop a life where we are while we just don't have to. And you can decrease so much your anxiety or your stress about life if you just understand that you can do what we call geographic arbitrage. You just move somewhere else that's cheaper, provided you find a way to make, let's say, 1K a month or 2K a month. Like the most important is probably to focus on that. How do I make 1 or 2K or 3K a month from anywhere, and then just adapt my life and go live somewhere else so I can lower my stress in life and live a better life, basically.
Yeah. So back then, I mean, I used to have this journal that I used to write in a lot as well, but I kind of had a plan of 40K was like my number. And I was like, if I can get that, then that should enable
40K a year.
Yeah, pounds. But that was literally it. When I first built Hairburst, that was the goal, is to be able to build something that provided me with that every year, to be able to live that lifestyle, which is what I wanted at the time. And obviously things changed over the time, but what you're saying is, I mean, we know we agree on a lot of things already, but yeah, exactly what you're saying. And I think going back to your previous point about, I think what you're talking about is almost like it's like a social game that people play, which is actually irrelevant, but people find it hard to see that when you're talking about like keeping up with the Joneses is like the term, but people see like other people doing well or have certain things and that drives people's behavior. But that's a human trait, but it's actually pointless because it's not going to make you happy. So
yeah, because at the end of the day, no one cares about your life. They have enough struggles and problems in their own life, so that they just don't have time to think about yours, basically. But it's a big thing. I had the same, like especially when you get out of whatever university time or whatever school time, you're basically 20 or something like that. You're insecure, and you feel like everybody's going to judge you or actually care about all your actions. So even when you start, I don't know, if whatever you do a career change or you take a break for 1 year or 6 months, you think, oh, I can do that. My future employer will see on my CV that I have a 6-month break or a 1 year break. How am I going to justify that? Or, I don't know, you change your career. How am I going to justify that I changed from whatever career to another? Or when you start a business, you think, oh, if I fail, like everybody's going to make fun of me or whatever. I need to succeed so people think that this guy is the GOAT or this girl is the GOAT. But no one gives a fuck. No one cares, basically. And like, the faster you understand that, the faster you...
But it's like, but like all the social stuff, like I guess social anxiety is probably the term, but like I really cared so I did the poker bit, I did the traveling bit. This is like pre-Hairburst. I was selling the used phones, but I had a job at Phones for You, selling phones. And like I hated the thought of people seeing me there. Because I was attached to what I thought I was, which was like travel, poker, successful in a way at the time for my age. And then spent all my money traveling, came back home. I was at Phones for You, I was selling phones, right? And I was actually making a load of money because I was buying the phones off the customers who finished with their used phone and reselling them. But I still had the blue shirt on, I still had my trousers on, I still had to be there at 10 o'clock and leave at 6 or whatever it was. And that really bothered me. And really, I had a bigger goal in my head and I knew where I was going, and because I was doing the stuff on the side, I was doing okay money-wise, but it wasn't what I wanted to be, and I felt really anxious around that.
Yeah, when at the end of the day, it was just one step towards your final goal. And like, if you understand that and you look at the big picture and you think a bit more long term, like you need to do these things that are not that sexy to get to wherever you want in life, because you're not going to get there in 1 month. It's going to take you many years, and it's a step-by-step process. Okay, so let's talk about the Hairbust story. So can you tell us about the beginnings? How did it all start?
So it started... So I knew I wanted to do e-commerce, and a big factor was the change in social media. So I actually had another job in between the phones and the Hairburst starting. So I worked at a marketing agency in Leeds, which used to focus on mostly search engine optimization and pay-per-click advertising, which was like this is like 2011. So that was like, I mean, it's still really popular today, but that's what the agency focused on. And I can't remember the year, I believe it was 2012, it was when Instagram started. And it was quite apparent quite early that, because I would speak to the business owners when I was working in this agency, because I was a sales guy. So I'd go to see a business owner who maybe sells like, I remember one was like beds, another one was sell like sheds or like tools, or one was sports nutrition products. So I'd go speak to the owners and be like, okay, how much money do you have on marketing? How much you spend on this? How much do you spend on that? And I would understand like their problems and struggles and successes. But then as social media was coming around, it was quite evident that you could drive traffic to websites for much, much cheaper through social. So that's like Facebook, Instagram, even Twitter as well. So e-commerce came from that. And we needed to find something that we could start with, really. So we needed to find our own branded products, because from selling phones, I realized that if I wanted to make exponential wealth, I had to build my own IP. So I needed to build a brand. It needed to be like a privately owned intellectual property, which was owned by us, because that's where the value lies in goods. So we thought about maybe doing like sports nutrition, but with the growth of Instagram and the audience on Instagram at the time, like going into hair was seemed like quite a good category to go into, because we understood nutrition from a background in sport, and we needed to sell through Instagram. So something that's quite visual, like hair, was quite a good option. So that's where the idea came from.
Okay, awesome. And so how did you decide who to associate yourself with? Were there friends? Were there like people who had complementary skill? Because like that's one of the key things when you start a business.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So my two, so ultimately it was two best friends. Now, there's me and Gwil and Craggy. I think you've met both of them, haven't you?
Yes.
So we were best friends. We did the traveling trip together. We knew each other really well, and it kind of just felt like a good idea to do it with my friends, because it'd be fun. Like, if I was to advise someone,
that's very risky.
Yeah, now I know that. Yeah, but like we're speaking to like a lot of business owners today, and like I don't actually know what it's like to be a solo founder. It's like even my brother who's here today, like he's running his business on his own, and like yeah, it's great because you have all the shares, but I've been so fortunate to have my two best friends with every day. And like I've said it many times, but I don't know first of all, at some point in a business's life, you never own the whole thing anyway, because you either raise for investment where you give shares away, or you sell it. So an acquirer comes in and buys like some shares. So it's very hard doing it. I know people do it, right? But so for me, it was my two best friends. So yeah, being a solo founder, I think it's very difficult. To have people in there with you, like working is good, but when I decided who to work with, it was just my mates. So yeah, very risky, but it all worked out, and we had great fun.
So you go basically to your best mates. How do you decide who is doing what? Like, do you know, okay, this guy has complementary skills, different skills, or you're just like, oh, we're a good bunch of good lads. What do you like to do the most? I'll do that, you do that, you do that, and let's see how it goes.
Yeah, good question. So,
and then maybe after that, you can maybe give your own opinion on building a business with friends and on choosing the roles in the beginning for like people who want to start businesses, to see how do you maximize the chances of making it work, knowing that most of the business failures are actually coming from founding team problems.
Oh, 100%. Right. Yeah. Okay. So my example first. Yeah. So it was fairly simple. So one of my business partners, so he had this is just what he's like, but Craggy, he had a page called Beers and Tats on Instagram. And he was like, at the time I didn't have a clue like why he would do that, but he basically had this Instagram page called Beers and Tats, and he would post guys who were like really good looking and had like cool tattoos and beards, right? That was like, he just used to do that. and I never understood why he did it, but he was like, he's quite an arty guy, like he's interested in like stuff like that. I mean, I'm not like that at all, but he was. And I used to find it quite funny. But before long, he got to...
This is 10 years ago, about.
Oh, yeah, it's like 2012.
Yeah, so it's 10 years ago. So it's actually, okay.
So he's like posting these guys, and I'm like, why are you doing it? And he's like, oh, I just like to do it. Before long, he had like 10,000 followers, and then 20, and then 30. And now it's got probably 200,000 followers on this page. And And then he would get, and this is really important actually, but he would then get requests from guys or like barbershops or brands to feature on his page. So he'd be like, oh, can you shout out my like friend so-and-so to post on the page? And obviously they would go on the page, they get loads of followers, and it was like, that's that whole game that we found ourselves involved in. And that was a big eye-opener to me, because I was at the agency speaking to business owners paying 10, 20K a month for search engine optimization. Yet these people who were messaging my mate at home on this beard page for like 20 quid, but they're driving lots of traffic. So I was like, this is like a huge moment. So content was that, which is super important for a branded product, right? We needed to get content on the page. So that's what Craigie focused on. And then Gwil focused on the influencers. And I kind of took on the operations side. And then we kind of had this like 3-month phase of like figuring out who's good at doing what. And I ultimately became like the CEO, major shareholder, but I felt like I grabbed it by the scruff of the neck and like really like pulled it through. And I was more of I used to think more bigger picture. So it was like, in the end, it worked out really well. So we had like, Craigie was doing the content. Gwil used to do the influencer stuff, which was like real hard graft, but he used to like be really good at that. And I would kind of like monitor what was going on and like really push it forward. But I was also doing like customer service, supply, like loads of other bits. But that was what we did. So to actually give some useful advice, I'm trying to think, what was the question? What would I recommend to people?
So basically, yeah, it kind of happened that, it looks like you kind of went with your lads, you guys kind of defined roles, and kind of almost luckily, everybody was good at what they were doing, which if you start with some friends is pretty unlikely to happen, you know? I think it's more unlikely than likely to happen. So the main question is, what would you recommend? Every situation is different, but what would you recommend to people who are starting a business today to maximize their chances of not having a founding team falling apart? Do you start with your friends, or do you look at what are the skills I need?
Mm-hmm. So friends is great because we had so much fun. Like we're literally in the garage, like packing these products together, like we're writing the labels together. We've got the music on. We're having a great time. So like, and that's important, like having a good fun, if you can have good fun, like, but at the same time, like Gwil's dealing with like doing the influencer side and Mike's doing the content. I'm doing like all the operations and like planning out the finances and ordering the products in. And it's the fun side, because there's a lot of not fun in that. Like I'm speaking to customers on like the house phone, like we're having customer calls and I'm like dealing with that. So that's not that fun, but because we're all together, that was fun. So I think having a good time and somebody you enjoy being with is like key. Now, only from running a business for 10 years and having like, working with so many different people, and now we've got like 50 staff or something, that I wasn't good at hiring, really. Like we've now got like unbelievable people in the business, but a lot of that was like, I'm learning over the last 2 years much more. But I look back to some of my decisions when I was younger, and it was like, I didn't really know and have like a real structure of hiring the best people. So to give context for like making sure the founding teams work together. You can probably, if you were to sit down, you'd probably find people with different skill sets, but I think what's really required to get things off the ground is just an entrepreneurial mindset. So the same reason why bigger businesses acquire smaller businesses, obviously, because it's got to a certain stage, it gives it a seal of approval. So they go, okay, these guys can do things on their own. I think finding people who are doing that, it might be people who've got, I don't know, like Craigie, for example, was doing the pages thing. Like he showed initiative to do something there. So he had potentials there as well. So I think finding people with initiative, finding people who are entrepreneurial, and people you can enjoy spending time with. And I think as long as people are willing to learn new stuff, then that's important. And also just finding winners, like whether they're winners at sport or anything else. It's all like really useful stuff.
Awesome. So basically you're having fun with your friends. You are building something, but probably it's the beginning, so you're not really sure where it's going, if it's something even really serious. So what's the moment that you realize that it's not just for fun anymore, that it's an actual business with potential?
So, like I said at the start, like initial goal was like 40K, which was a thing I figured out with expenses in terms of like traveling in the Southeast Asia or whatever. And we probably achieved that within 7-8 months.
So 40K per person.
Yeah. And it was obvious that we could get there. So in terms of like technicalities, we were driving people to this website and initially wasn't converting people. So I knew like from what we spent to what the products cost, we had to achieve a conversion rate on the site, which I used to get, everyone used to take the piss at me for at the time, but it was, I know if we got a conversion rate of like 2.5%, I think it was, that we could make enough money to be finish our jobs that we were doing at the time. So we could focus on it full time. So there was like, when we hit that point, it was like all the different pieces were working. Like our product cost was this and it was fairly stable. Our conversion rate was this and it was fairly stable. And we can drive the traffic for this cost, which was becoming more and more stable because we'd done it for a few months. So the three pieces were together. We did that. We had like good cash flow coming in, but a brand new business, like you always have that. Well, I always had that thought of how long is this going to last? Like how long can we pay the influencers this much? How long can we drive traffic for this price? How long is the Instagram algorithm going to be like this? You know, and that's like more evident now. But back then, you kind of have this uncertainty. So it was kind of serious from the start. But again, like my initial goal was to travel. So I did a trip to Fiji actually. Once I had enough money to do so, and I could take a bit of time off. That was the first. I didn't have a holiday before that. It was like a 2-year gap. And I can remember thinking during that time, like everything's in play. And then it started to get more serious when we managed to get into stores, because I was like, we've got the online business, we've now got the retail business. And I look at older brands and be like, well, what's the difference between like this brand and the one that sold to like Church and Dwight for 100+ million? Like we have the social media knowledge, we have the stores. And this brand also has the stores, but we have the social side. We can grow here, we can grow here. And it was like, wow, this thing can really become big if we just continue to do what we're doing, build a proper team, build out SKUs. And that was probably after like the first 15 or so months.
So can you tell, I mean, how do you deal with, you said basically like, building a business is exactly that. You have some kind of targets that are some goals. Okay, I want 40K per person. But then you have a bunch of assumptions. For example, the cost per influencer, the Instagram algorithm, all that stuff that you know is going to change. So basically, you're constantly in an uncertain state. And so basically, how do you live with that? How do you learn to be chill with that when, you know, a lot of people who want to start businesses probably never do it is because of that stuff, because they're always going to think about all the things that could go wrong or that will change. What would you tell to people? I mean, how do you deal and become comfortable with uncertainty? Is it like a natural thing? Is it, I don't know, you do more sport, you have more testosterone? Like what's the, or you just get used to it with time? Or more, like how do you look at the positive and know things are going to change, but you're going to find a solution, versus just looking at the negative, which basically is going to be all these changes that will happen anyway at a certain time?
I think, going back to how we dealt with it at the time was, let's just make the most, we used to work like so hard, right? And just do everything that we could do. Number one, like focus on what we can actually change. Focus on like a bit of a stoic mindset, like what can we actually change? Okay, we can just work 10 times harder now while we have opportunity to make good money at the time. So like we did that, but in terms of like a bigger picture thing, like once we got to the point where we were financially free, I guess, like probably this is when I was probably like 25, I would say. I was probably, at that point, I was probably financially free for what I class financially free was, which is like a passive income of a certain amount, and get to that point first. That's like the ultimate goal, get there first. And then everything around you that might happen that can be quite stressful becomes much less stressful. Yeah. Now, up until last year or like 18 months ago, these things still stress me out, right? And I was essentially financially free, but I was still stressed about it. Because there's a lot of things you can't control and you can't do, but if you can get yourself into a safer position, then everything's a lot less stressful, I would say, which I understand is hard to do, and we can talk about that, but yeah.
We'll talk about that later. So this was kind of the beginnings of the business. Now we're talking about growing the business. So basically, when you're growing a business, there are key moments where you have to make some changes or some big changes to get to the next level. So what were those? I don't know. What were the one or two like big changes that you had to do, and what were those?
So I'd probably say, like you go through a stage in a business where, like, we were doers. So we were on the phone, arranging like new deals with retailers, like going and doing the sales pitches, contacting the influencers, doing the customer service. So then going, okay, it then becomes a job of, which I actually really enjoy, and it's about capital allocation or like resource allocation. And this is like a thing, but do you ever play Age of Empires?
I did for maybe 2 or 3 months. But
Yeah.
I'm not an expert. But
so,
yeah.
So like what I'm trying to say is like, so on that game, you basically have like wood, gold, stone and whatever, right? And you basically have to allocate that in the right way to be able to build. And that is literally the same as building a business. So I used to, I don't know where that came from, but that's just what I thought of. And I used to sometimes think that as well, because you go, okay, I can't do anymore, because if you continue to do, you can't grow past a startup, because you can't grow past your time. But what do you have as a business? You have like money to spend, time, and essentially effort. So you have to like use those three things. So with money, you can buy more time by getting more people, but they have to be managed and integrated properly. So it was about that phase, which was like a hiring phase, applying the capital in the right places, like managing that. And then you can't, what's quite frustrating about it is you can't, like if I want to change something in the business now, I can't go and change it. I have to like speak to this person who tells this person who tells this person. So you go through that phase. So you go from like a doer to a leader almost. And that's what a CEO's role is to allocate the right time and effort and direct different things, which can be frustrating for some people, but it's basically about delegation. And we actually, I think people can fall into two camps. They can either over delegate or don't delegate as much. I think for me, I actually over delegate, which means I'll put like resources, so I'll put capital and responsibility with different areas of the business and just hope it just works out. And the problem with that is it goes wrong. Whereas other people might be, which is actually more common, is they're so desperate to be on everything that nothing can scale. Because if you want to do everything, you can't scale a business. You have to learn. So some people don't delegate enough and they find themselves in a situation where they're doing everything, which is good because you have control, but then how big can it possibly get? So I was actually the opposite of that. So I'd over delegate and things would go wrong everywhere. But yeah, that's that phase.
Okay, maybe some word on that. Like, what would you say if you over delegate? Like, what didn't you do properly that could have been done better, so it would have gone wrong a bit less?
Yeah. So it probably comes down to education and probably like over expectation as well. Like, just, I don't know, this is a stupid example, but like, so with the Hairburst brand, we have a clear brand message that we've built on and decided to have that. Now, we might have a salesperson. This hasn't actually happened, but this is just an example. Like, you might hire somebody new in the sales team and they go and speak to different distributors in a new country. And what's super important is we get that message across to that distributor. But unless you spend enough time with that person to educate them on what our brand values are, then that might come across wrong. And these things happen all the time. So I think to combat that is like more education, slower process, and making sure that people are prepared to do things that way. Or more importantly, like have a really stringent recruitment process to ensure that you get people who are the right people as well, which we, yeah.
Can you tell us about some of the biggest pains you need to go through when you grow a business?
Biggest pains?
Yeah. Can be anything. Can be mental health.
Yeah.
Can be relationships with colleagues, with co-founders. can be, I don't know, having to change some people who are at key positions, or maybe fire them because you know that if you want to get to the next level, you need another kind of person, and so on and so forth.
Biggest challenge, I mean, because I started
it's more like, for me, challenges could be like positive. This is really like about the pains. Like, what are people who want to grow a business need to be basically ready for?
So what I found, and I realized I had to do this, so we, let's say, I think this is a point where we had like maybe like 10 staff and 3 founders, so it was like 13 people. And you kind of, again, like another analogy, so I always look at it like, because I like football, I kind of compare things. Like if you're going to be growing at like 50% a year, your business is growing at 50% a year, you need to look around and be like, hey, is this a winning team? Is this like, are we like the Man City or the Liverpool of what we do? And I'd be looking around and thinking, okay, where are we lacking? What positions need to change? And you have to kind of, I mean, it's not nice to like fire people. It's not nice to like deliver bad news. That's never going to get easier. And I've got someone who does that for me now, so I don't have to deal with that, but I didn't have before. And you have to go from, okay, we kind of went through a phase of like, this is really fun with our mates. Like, we had a few staff join, that was really cool. Like, we became their friends almost like straight away because we were nice guys and wanted to have fun, and we'd hire people into the business and everything was fine. But it was a bit like, okay, well, this is not how a real winning team is built. Like, you have to deliver bad news, you have to fire people who are affecting the positive culture, for example. And I had to become a different person then, because I can't be everyone's mate. I can't be someone's friend and go out for a few drinks and then fire them tomorrow because they missed a target or whatever. So I almost had to become like a different character, which wasn't easy because I didn't want to do that, but you kind of have to, right? You have to make sacrifices and you have to become not strict, but just accountable.
Okay. And like, more or less, like, how much time would you need? Like, would you say you kind of needed from the moment you said, we need to be, I don't know, Manchester United, but we are not, and you realize it, but how much time, I don't know, weeks, months, years, until you say, okay, I'm actually going to do something about it because I'm the one who needs to do something about it. And you don't want to be doing it because you don't want to be an asshole, basically. But so, yeah, how long? The first time, at least.
So I mean, so I did look around and think, well, it's obviously me because I'm the majority shareholder, I'm the main beneficiary, so I need to be accountable to make all these changes. And if you're in a situation where a position is not functioning properly, like every book that you read will tell you that, okay, well, like fire fast is the solution, but that's not easy to do. So it would take me months, to be honest. But I never became, like, you hear about, like, I don't know, like super successful people like Steve Jobs and all these people who are like assholes and they would just sack people like left, right, and I was never like that. Being like that's probably the best way to be, but you can't just become that overnight. I can't anyway. I found that really difficult. But it takes a lot of time to be able to behave in that way, I think.
What would you turn? What do we turn to get advices in that kind of moments, like mentors or books or both?
So and this is not a good thing, but I never had any mentors, and so I would just rely on books. Like that's my. I mean, that's the way I felt like I ingested information better from. Even I used to just enjoy reading stuff, which is that's probably one of my biggest assets. Is I enjoy reading books. I mean, people can learn from listening to podcasts, or they can take information in different ways. Like for me, I always enjoyed reading and felt like I retained information through reading, which was what then enabled me to read so much more because I enjoy it. So I would rely on books all the time. Like what we're talking about now is that middle phase, like Good to Great by Jim Collins is an amazing book where it talks about getting people off the bus, getting the right people on the bus, keeping people accountable and all that kind of stuff.
Can you just repeat the name of the book?
Good to Great by Jim Collins.
Okay, Good to Great. Okay. Awesome.
No mentors. I've relied on books completely, but I also think with books as well in general, like I think if I was to try and explain all the things that I thought was good to somebody, like we can spend 2 hours doing this today and hopefully people can get information from it. But if I could sit down and write a book, which might take me a year, like so all these people who have like been super successful have done that, and it's in a book form. Like, what's the Sam Walton who founded Walmart? He famously wrote a book in like, I can't remember when it was, probably 40, 50 years ago. I think he was pretty much on his deathbed at the end of his life, and he wrote a book, and like it's there to read, you know.
Yeah.
Like how awesome is that? So.
And it's much more structured, basically, and people can take the time they need to. I mean, there's nothing better than a book to actually express an idea or a framework, or to learn about it. Absolutely, that's it's really underrated. I mean, I'd say I'm not everyone, but even for me, I was always thinking, these books, like there's whatever, a lot. But the day you're really interested into something, for example, investing, which we'll talk about later, it's almost stupid, but you find one or two books about investing, and then you learn everything, and you're like, holy shit! Like I literally went from knowing nothing to learning everything in a structured fashion, which you can't find in podcasts. It's too short. And so actually reading books, I mean, even Elon Musk, basically, the reason he's been able to build rockets and understand all this stuff is because he's read all the books from every library on earth since he's 3 years old or 5 years old. So
I had that all the way through my life. Like when I was 15, I was interested to know what it'd be like to be a professional football player. I was never going to be one, but I wanted to be one. But I read like Paul Gascoigne's book was the first book I ever read, and I really enjoyed it, which was probably a big thing. I read like Frank Lampard's book, and then when I did the poker, I was like, okay, I need to get good at poker to make money. Read loads of poker books, went to do e-commerce, read e-commerce books. Before the sale of Hairburst, it was like, right, well, I don't know what's the best route to sell a business. So I read loads of private equity books, and now I spend a lot of time reading about investments and all that kind of stuff because I'm in a different phase now. But that's kind of been a theme throughout. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we talked about books. There's a lot of documentation out there about a lot of different things, and one of them is the biggest reasons why businesses fail. And one of them is actually founders' issues. It's very well documented that often it's not because, I don't know, you don't generate enough cash or you don't have enough customers that the business fails, but it's more because you lose motivation, and often it's because there is some founder issues. So you guys basically seem to have like been able to really minimize this, because you said I started with my two best friends. Probably they're still in your circle of like best friends. Mm-hmm. What can you tell us about the biggest challenge that you encountered with your co-founders?
So biggest challenge was Craggy again. So he got diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma when we were quite young. So we were like 25, I would say. So he'd been running the business like 2 or 3 years. And that was really challenging because obviously we wanted him in there to be working with, but also that was just quite a difficult time because I had to figure out what to do about that from a business perspective. You've got your best mate who you live with, who's like been diagnosed with cancer and he's going through like chemotherapy. Yeah. And I mean, now he's fine now. And he's doing really well, but we had to navigate that. And ultimately we had to buy his shares. So he was able to spend time and focus on his health. But from a business perspective, that's a strain on capital. So that was a difficult thing to go through. I think because we were friends as well, between all three of us, like it was probably couldn't be as direct as you would be with other people because you don't want to upset them because you're your friends. Whereas if you had like a pure like business relationship with people, you probably would be a bit more direct, but we never wanted to. So the good thing is we had fun, but the bad thing was we probably wasn't as direct as we could have been with other people. I think founder issues it's often a fallout on strategy and plan, and also motivation as well. Like some people want to build a business to 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, 50 or 100 or whatever. And they're generally, especially in startups, they're very involved in the business. So it's a strain on time and capital if they leave. But yeah, you always hear about stories like that.
Okay, awesome. Let's move on to the sale part of the business. So basically there is your case, but like when do you decide that you want to sell a business?
So in our scenario, what happened was we started to get approached by different companies and also by advisors. So
when is that first time you get approached? Like how many years are you into the project, and
so we were probably
how well is it doing, and how do they even learn about you?
So we got approached because we must have been doing pretty well, because they obviously heard about the brand and heard about us guys and stuff. So I'd probably say so from start to finish, it was like a 9-year thing. And probably like year 5, we started to get approached by potential investors, buyers, things like that. And because the business was generating enough cash, we were able to like how we ran it was bootstrapped, so we never raised any money. But because we were so, like the overall goal was to get to 40K, we wanted to get to that point and more. So could do that for longer. So we would draw dividends down quite a lot. If I was to do something again, now I've got money behind me, I'd probably go much more aggressive and grow like crazy and raise loads of debt and do this all this stuff. But I didn't know about that at the time. So we just draw money down into savings, build the business that way.
Just a question. Do you have this kind of conversation with your co-founders about wealth creation, a plan B beside your business? You know, about the basically saying, okay, we'll get this money as a dividend because the goal is to basically build wealth on the side. Like how much are they like into building wealth like you, or are they like more kind of learning from you, or like how is it happening?
Yeah. So I sort of made all the decisions when it came to that. Now, which is super important, the overall goal is to be financially free. So when you have like all this money sat in a business bank account, I want to put it into investment savings and draw it down, right? And the way we run our business with like the e-commerce part and the retail part is all about diversifying the revenue streams so it was safer. And then zooming out a bit further, like personally, it was all about diversifying our long-term plan. So great, we've got the Hairburst stuff and we've got the cash, but we can either deploy that cash into more Hairburst growth, or we can put it into safer assets and invest it that way. So that was kind of how it came around. Again, I keep talking about books, which I don't mean to, but I think we both read the same one, which was Money
Master the Game.
Money Master the Game by Tony Robbins.
Yes.
Yeah, which is about this big. And it says the same thing about 50 times. But I think but it basically meant the idea around investing my money, I can get 7% a year. So in theory, if I get £1 million, I get 70,000 a year for well, not for free, but on returns. So 2 million would be 140,000, 3 million would be 210K. So it's like, once I realized that, it was like, let's draw it down, let's get the money in the investment funds and let that start to work. So if anything goes wrong here, I'm free forever, you know? So that was the plan there. But we'd gone through all that phase. Then we got contacted to sell the business by different advisors. I started to speak to PE funds by myself, which was probably a mistake because I wasn't ready for that. But we then appointed an advisor after like 6 years. But it was all based on demand. So like PE funds would contact me like every month, like, we want to buy half your business, blah, blah, blah. So we need to figure out how to navigate that.
Okay. So you have private equity firm contacting you. Okay. And then basically, but they contact you, but you don't want to sell in the beginning. So how long basically since you started to think about actually selling?
Yeah.
You know, like, which comes probably later on, and then. So how long from that moment when you think about selling until a deal actually was made? Because that's probably, like, I think people, what they need to understand, like for everything in life, but especially in business, is how long things take.
Wow.
Every time.
So from the point where we was like, okay, we're going to market to sell was 18 months.
18, okay.
But before that, there's a few things that happen in the market. Like I saw, like, I mean, there's so many brands, but like a sports nutrition brand sold for like 3 times revenue. A competitor to ours sold for like 3 times revenue as well. So there's like all these different things were happening in the market. And I started to quickly realize like what the business was roughly worth.
Yeah.
Which is an indicator of like, okay, that'd be quite good if we could do that. But then we also wanted to make sure we got the business to the right position so it could do a transaction, which is where the advisors would help with. But then, yeah, from starting to go to market to actually come into a deal was 18 months, which is super long. And that was, when we talk about challenges, I think I respect anybody who's kind of gone through that, to be able to build an asset that can be sold to a PE fund or whoever, because it's a lot of work.
So how do we even go? So basically, you say at some point you say I want to sell my business.
Yeah.
How do you even go about finding a buyer? And so you have PE firms coming, so private equity firms for people who don't know what PE means, coming to you. But like, how do you go about finding a buyer? Which for me, a buyer is someone who you actually think you're going to be able to deal with. Not someone who just want to take advantage of you.
Yeah. So in terms of a process, so most people will appoint like a corporate finance advisor. So they will essentially be connected in that market. So I chose like a beauty focused guy who I trusted and did a lot of deals in the similar space. We had some inbound interest from various different funds. So I understood that there was demand for our business, but you obviously want to get the best deal. So in effect, you hire a corporate finance advisor who gets the business in a position, and we create like a simple deck, like a PowerPoint, for example, that then gets sent through the market. So that'll go out to 20 or 10 potential, but we had like 6, I think it was, inbound requests. So I knew people wanted the asset. But the corporate finance advisor would go out to market, send out the information. We'd then jump on various different calls and meetings with all the different people. Then after that information, you get a round of first offers, and you kind of get a feel for which direction you want to go in.
Okay, and so what are the most important things to be careful when you're dealing with the buyer? And can you give us some concrete example based on your experience? Because I think it's something that, again, like, people only see these people build this massive business, or they sell for that much, that's amazing. But like, they don't understand all the things that can go wrong when you're selling a business. And they don't also understand that a lot of entrepreneurs get actually built an amazing asset, and then they get screwed during that part of the process because it's business at the end of the day, and you're dealing with like much bigger companies with much bigger pockets and very smart people who are not here to be your friend, but to actually make money on the deal.
And the cheaper they buy it for, the more money they make on the other side. So there's a few things that happen. So, and I've had this a few times speaking to like different founders, so they go through that stage of like speaking to the different people. So then the buyers will get asked to put through an indicative offer. So what an indicative offer is, they've probably seen a PowerPoint presentation. They've probably seen some basic finance information, and then they're asked to submit an offer, right? So what they'll do is throw in a big offer. So they'll go, right, okay, whatever, yeah. A big offer that might be overinflated on what the actual asset's worth, but that offer actually means nothing. So at that point, I would suggest that you it is all about people. Business is about people. So you need to work with people you're going to trust, I would say. Like, once the indicative offers have come in, you then go into a phase of like real due diligence, which is like super hard work because you're on calls like every day. It's probably like a 2-month process of like going through all the finance information, all the legal information, checking this, checking that, going through business strategy, all this kind of stuff. So, and then after that, which is like 2 months later, then you get your final offer, and then you have like a negotiation phase there. So I think I wouldn't get too carried away with indicative offers because it doesn't really mean anything, and it can change at any moment. I think you kind of are gonna. We didn't actually do a deal with a PE fund, we did a deal with a PLC, but
was that?
So when our deal with JD, that's like a PLC. But my experience with like some of the private equity firms that we worked with was about. We got to the end. We kind of went through loads of different phases, and you get to the end, and then there's loads of like messing around with like price and stuff. But I'd probably, if I did it again, I'd probably be more careful about who I'd spend, because it takes so much time. Like if you want someone to buy your business, it's almost like untold hours of conversations and work to get to that point of where they can actually submit an offer. So I'd probably be a bit more selective around, because what I would do is I kind of had this like, don't leave a stone unturned approach. So if someone was interested in buying our business and they put in a good indicative offer, I would spend the time to really engage with them and get them to a point where they could put a final offer in. But really, I probably should have been a bit more stringent. So, I'd probably be mindful of that a bit more in terms of like the amount of time I'm investing, because you've got to run the business at the same time. Like if you're going through a 6-month process, 6 months in a business, especially in e-commerce, is like a long, long time. So I'd probably keep my eye on the business more and not take offers too seriously until it's much further down the line.
But what can go wrong during these 2-3 months of due diligence? And how can you perceive whether the other party is trying to do a win-win or is trying to screw you on the deal?
What can go wrong? So I think, the number one thing that goes wrong is trading. So we'll have a budget set out, but it should be submitted to the buyer for this year and next year and everything. And if you say you're going to hit this number and you miss your budget by 20% during the process, that's going to affect value. So the number one thing that goes wrong is the business or the asset that's being sold has some issues during the process. So I just purely focus on the business. And then in terms of what can go wrong from a founder's perspective, you just spend all this time with people and they just chop you at the end. So until the money's been handed over, the deal's not done. And it was 18 months, right? So I kind of knew what the asset was worth. I knew what these offers were, but I kind of just tried to pretend it wasn't happening until the very end, because until the money's in your bank, it's not been done. And a lot of people want to, especially with our business, a lot of people want to know how our business works. So and no one's going to buy your business without knowing all the details. So we have information that we don't want to share with buyers, or how we run our business, or how we do our social media strategy, and all this stuff that's integral to the business value. Yeah. The buyer wants to know all that before they transact. So you have to really go through all that. And I think that's something to expect, but also not ideal, but part of the process.
Okay, so basically you have a 18-month long process.
Yep.
To basically sell your company, or at least some shares. But it doesn't end there. And that's something that people need to understand too, is basically what are some examples, not even taking your example, but in general, what are some example of terms that an entrepreneur can expect? What's the reality behind, for example, a headline saying, okay, this founder sold his company for, say, 100 million or $1 billion US. What happens? How long are you locked afterwards? How much money do you get upfront? What do you even get? Do you get cash? Do you get stocks? People think, oh, this guy worked 2 years or 1 year, sold Instagram, made 1 billion. Mm-hmm. Or this guy worked 5 or 10 years and then he went to the beach. But it's not what happens. So what's the typical terms that someone who is selling a business can expect, so people understand that basically the moment where probably you get to an agreement is just another beginning, and you're not done.
I think this is one of the nice things about finance is, it's not really true, but people say sometimes it's an art, not a science, and because there's so many different ways, which is what I like about finance, is there's so many different ways that things can be done, and investing, there's so many different ways that things can be done. So there's basically a clean sheet of paper, and then from that is what the deal looks like in the end. But in theory, we had loads of different ways which deals were structured, but ultimately, there is deals where, even in e-commerce, there's deals where a big company wants to buy a company and they pay 100% in cash. But in reality, what usually happens is it'll be, if a majority, it might be 8%, and then often there's things to be hit. So a very common thing is if someone buys your business for X, let's just pick a simple number 10 million, let's say, just to make it simple to work out. So your business might be bought for 10 million, and it might be something 50% in cash, 30% over the next 3 years for hitting certain targets, and then 20% ongoing that's on a put call option, which means you could sell the remaining shares in 5 years' time or something. So, and it happens with there's a lot of headline figures that come out. I don't know about the Instagram one that was massive. I reckon that probably was just money, because companies like Facebook, they've got so much cash, they just want to get it out the door. So yeah, but there's lots of different structures that happen. But it's up to it all comes down to what the asset is. If the asset's super strong, then you can kind of dictate what terms you want. And if it's not, then it's much, much harder. So I hear about all the different types of deals that are done, but yeah, often when you see 100 mil cash, there's often a lot of things that have gone around that.
Okay, awesome. So can you tell us about some of the biggest business challenges or toughest moment in Hairbust history?
I think something that which we actually discovered, but I actually went and spoke to. I was on an e-commerce podcast a few weeks ago, and they asked a similar question, but it was about like, how do you get from? He says a lot of people seem to be able to get to like 1 million in sales, and then they don't know how to scale past that. So we didn't either, but we found out a way, which was enabling more sales channels and more countries, basically. So like if you can scale in one country, like why can't you scale in like 20? So like one thing that we did with Hairburst was we started off in the UK, and we found a system that works, but to be able to scale, we did France, Germany, Thailand, Vietnam, Italy, Spain, US, and it was about, but you actually have to do it. So that was a challenge in terms of like, what I see a lot of companies do is they manage to scale in like one market, but again, it's like geographical arbitrage. We've spoke about this in the past, but like the guys who at Rocket Internet who sold their first business because they saw eBay in the US and they made it in Germany and they sold it like 40 days later to eBay or whatever it was. And it's like, that's happening at all times all over the world. So social media boom, we did it in the UK. Why can't we do it in loads of other countries? And I think a lot of businesses not do that, which is, it's geographical arbitrage, but it's also ways to scale is multiple different markets.
Can you give some concrete example of where it just went completely wrong? I think you told me once about this example in one of the North African country, or I don't know, like you do some, like some significant investment to start something there, or channel or whatever, and it just doesn't work at all.
Yeah,
like
to nail down a few. I mean, I feel like, especially like operating as like the CEO type role, you're constantly just firefighting issues. So it's quite hard to like nail some down. But I mean, we have like, there's fake products coming out in China of like Hairburst products all the time. Like factories just rip off the brand. It's like, it looks like ours. It's not. It's just a counterfeit good. But that's like a massive issue for branded products, like huge. Like we have, it happened in, I think it was, which country was it? Happens in Vietnam. It happened in Spain. Like people would just buy fake Hairburst in Spain. Somehow it's ended up in Spain. They would just buy the fake Hairburst. The products would be nowhere near as good, right? Because you've got a plastic bottle with our logo on it, which looks the same, but the actual shampoo and conditioner, which is like, we sell premium products. It's like a £25 shampoo and conditioner, so it costs a lot of money to make, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. But this is just like shampoo from China that's got no active ingredients or anything in it. So these things are coming over, they're finding themselves on eBay in the UK, like we're having, and then customers try it and then leave a bad review or whatever, or message to say, oh, we've had this product. It's like, well, what's the batch code number? Oh, it's actually it's not even real. Like you're trying to then to go to have a legal case in China is like a non-starter. Like Apple can't sort that problem out, so we're not going to be able to sort it out. There's just endless amounts of issues, and I think you kind of I think I probably over the years got used to dealing with issues because you always got bad news coming, and like I guess I can kind of, like it's expected, like you walk in and it's like, well, what's the issue today? And you have to pick 3 and focus on those 3 issues. But there's been examples of trying to launch in certain markets and it's not worked, and the counterfeit problem was like a big issue. I think you kind of get used to, you kind of can, we'll come on to freedom, I'm sure soon, but like even though you might be able to come financially free, doesn't necessarily mean you're mentally free. So like I could go like on holiday somewhere, these problems aren't going to disappear.
Yeah.
Like I've been 24/7 Hairburst for like 9 years. So I'm not all of a sudden and during that period I've been to different places, but I'm still, like I walk on the beach, I'm thinking about Hairburst. I'll go to the gym, I'm thinking about Hairburst. Like that doesn't leave you. And I think maybe that's partly why it's been super successful, but it also it's part of the territory, like,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, talking about just all the issues and the fire and all these problems to solve. Just reminds me when we were building our first business in London, and basically you're thinking about it all the time, but every Monday we would just get back to the office and there would be like a huge problem. and be like, fucking hell, like this thing could have waited once until Tuesday, but like every time. And it's kind of funny to talk about it, but it's like a hammer every month, every time, like a hammer, boom, again, and people really, I think the most underestimated side of like building a business or running a business is basically the mental health cost and the emotional roller coaster, and you might have all these, I mean, people might see like the big wins and the money and all that stuff, but like what they don't see is like how much 99% of your time is just getting hammered with bad news and problems to solve, and yet still being able to continue living like that, basically. So how do you stay motivated when you just have issues all the time, or you just learn to realize that that's actually how it works? That's it.
Yeah, I mean, if I was to do it again, I would definitely structure it in terms of like, when I said before I didn't have any mentors, I could have found some for sure. Like these are people like I do it now. So I'm angel investment in various different e-commerce businesses. And if there's a big problem and they call me, like I'll try and help, right? But I had my best friends in the business who we talk over problems with, but it'd be quite good to know and have confidence that there's someone who's been there and done it within the business. And it's quite easy to find, like, there's so many investors out there. Like, I wasn't aware of this when I started, but point number one is that, how do you stay motivated? I think in terms of like getting through issues and stuff, I try to draw like confidence from, I think I had a lot of maybe inherent confidence just from like winning at sport and stuff when I was younger, maybe, I don't know, but I just kind of like faced with a problem, it's like kind of have that underlying confidence that I'll get through it. And ultimately having the goal, which was one, to be financially free, which comes at a cost, which is a lot of hard work, like in my early 20s. And then after 5 years was another goal, which was to sell a large majority of the business to the right party. So I think those kind of things get you through having an end goal.
Okay. So completely related to that, like, can you talk about the importance of basically resilience for an entrepreneur and how you actually become numb to problems and to all the fuck ups that happen at some point?
I think it always comes down to long-term thinking. Again, like my last answer, like you have to have some kind of like goal in sight, where you can deal with like short-term issues. It's probably it's the same with investing. Like you deal with like short-term pain, but you know, and you have a long-term vision. And I think as long as you want that goal enough, it always comes back down to like how much you actually want, what you're actually spending your time doing, how much you actually enjoy it. Like if you enjoy something, you're 10 times more likely to continue doing it, and it makes you more resilient. Like I loved doing Hairburst the majority of the time, so I was much more likely to continue and persevere through the issues. I think if you enjoy it, that's super valuable. And having a end goal, that end goal can change as you're doing. Like for me, it was first to be financially free, and then it became like much bigger than that, and then it became like the idea to exit and all this cool stuff. But you kind of have that view. I think if you don't have that view, you can kind of become, and I had this like problem phase when I was like, the age I was like 26, 27, where I was financially free, and I could probably retire off my like assets, let's just say. But you kind of like, it was people often talk about like gold medal syndrome and stuff when people sell their business. Like they work so hard for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, sell the business for the money, and then you have the money and you go, what now? What do I do next? Or what do I do? I kind of had that at 27 because I was like, well, I achieved my original goal. I was financially free. I could travel the world and go wherever I want. I had my own business. I didn't have anyone to tell me what to do or whatever. But then I kind of felt a bit lost. So I kind of went through that phase. Can't remember what the question was now, but I remember that period.
Yeah, so, I mean, maybe like, what are, you said, I love to do Hairburst. Like, what are the things you enjoy to do the most in Hairburst when your initial goal, the reason you started a business is, I mean, there's different reasons to start a business. Often, like, you solve a problem or you have a mission. For you, it was more in the beginning, I want to get to this 40K a year so I can basically move around a lot and, I don't know, travel and work from anywhere. So so the main mission in the beginning was not about exactly what you were doing. So what did you enjoy the most, basically? Or how did you learn to really enjoy what you were doing? Like, just trying to understand what really kept you through going through all this pain, except the financial freedom goal.
I think I found it quite intellectually stimulating, which is something that I searched for all the time, which I didn't realize at the time. But when faced with a problem, like, I quite enjoyed confronting it and overcoming it. And I think everyone needs that in life. Like, life isn't here to be like sit on the beach and do nothing. Like, there's problems all the time. My problems happen to be like daily Hairburst problems, and that was what I would end up solving, which in a big picture world is not a big issue at all. But for me in my life, it was quite good to get through that. I think accountability, like, I felt accountable to my best friends who were in the business, like my business partners. I felt accountable to the staff to give them like a good job and a good time and enjoy their time when they was with us.
Okay, can you tell us about the various emotional states that you've been through during the entire Hairburst experience?
So the best bit was at the start when I knew I didn't have to work for anybody else. That was like euphoria, I would say. Like, there's nothing, that was just like insane. Like, when everything was working, we were like printing money and it was all good fun. That was like the best bit at the start. And then kind of like what I mentioned briefly earlier was I hit a point where I was financially free and didn't actually know what was next. Because the goal is like, right, okay, I want to work for myself, make enough money. Now what? And I spent I was in Australia actually for a few months, and I was just like really trying to, like, the business was operating, probably had 30 staff, I'd say, at the time, something like that. Everything was kind of being taken care of, and it's like, well, this is great because the business is growing. I'm still actively involved. I get to deal with like the bigger problems, but what am I actually
What's the
doing?
goal now? Yeah.
Which is I think it's true in a lot of ways. Like, you have to start to consider like big picture things when you have like your basic needs taken care of, like food, finance, bed, these kind of things. And for me at the time, it was like passive income was like nailed at that point. What am I now? What am I going to really focus on? And it became like then the idea to do an exit of the business, and I continued to progress with that and stuff. But that was that probably maybe a bit of a lonely time, I would say, that period for maybe a year, because no one's gonna tell me what I enjoy to do. Do you know what I mean? No one's gonna say, oh, this is like, I mean, you can take examples from different people, but kind of figuring out what was next there. And I'd probably say the following 2 years, probably like selling the business was so stressful. It was like so self-consuming because it was like, I'd never done it before. Like, again, I'd do it different now, but that was like a really stressful period. So I don't know, like, the start was definitely the most fun, I would say, into a bit of loneliness in between, like being a CEO, having to deal with all the problems yourself, not really having someone to turn to. And then, yeah, as things got more like bigger and more corporate, I found that quite stressful, but maybe that was just my character. I don't know.
Okay. So people don't really understand the mental health costs that comes with building and running a business, and especially how it affects relationships with friends, family, and girls. Do you want to elaborate a bit on that? And what you think you did well, what you could probably have done better? This basically trade-off between relationships and, I mean, I think there is this thing where we say, I think it's when you build a business, basically you need to choose between work, health, or relationship, and you need to pick 2 out of 3. And so, like, do you want to elaborate a bit on, like, basically your experience about relationships while building a business like that?
Yeah, I think in anything there has to be an element of sacrifice, and unfortunately, that's probably, I mean, for me, would I have liked to spend more time with family? Yes. Would I have liked to spend more time with friends? Yes. Would I have liked to spend more time on my health? Yes. But it was, you kind of make that sacrifice. I think I was always fairly good at continuously going to the gym because I kind of felt that was like integral to my happiness, I guess. If I didn't go to the gym and stuff like that, I always liked doing sport as well. But you see that often in business people, like they kind of go through a stage of like the first bit's like everyone focuses on wealth as like the number one priority. And then when they get money, it's like, well, then they focus on the health afterwards. It probably should be the other way around. But I do think that you have to have some element of like hard graft. And if eating a bit of shit food and not going to the gym in between makes people do that, then it's just an element of sacrifice. But yeah.
Okay, how much do you reckon building a business from such a young age really helped you grow as a person, much faster than a person who would not go through that?
I think it definitely does, because you almost become like, at times, like at work, I feel like a parent because
yeah, a dad, yeah.
I mean, you've got like, I don't know, like I said, now I've got like 50 people. Like I'm not by any means the oldest member of staff. We've got people older than me and people younger than me, and you become the father figure in the business in one way or another. So I probably did grow up like really quick. I think I was always fairly sensible compared to some of my friends anyway, as I was growing up. But when I got to like, when you're 21, faced with, I think 21, probably 22, but maybe I had like 10, 11 staff. Everyone's looking to you for an answer. You kind of have to grow up quite quick. So I'd say that's definitely developed me in that side, but then I probably wasn't developed in other areas like relationships, for example, or other parts of life which you don't focus on as much. Because I mean, even now, like I don't know if it's my personality or just if you're running a business in general, but it's kind of that becomes your baby. So, I mean, I'm 33, I don't have any kids yet. It's probably because I've had this kid, which is Hairburst, for 10 years that occupies everything, and you kind of just stay so focused on that, you know? So, again, it probably needs that to be successful in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about success, what does it take to start a profitable business?
So,
because maybe just one thing now, there's a lot of businesses out there, but actually most of them are barely profitable, if profitable at all. So like basically what does it take to start a profitable business that's actually generating cash and profit, which at the end of the day, I mean, I think people understand it more and more now, but like a couple of years back, it was never about, profit and nothing. It was just about, I don't know, users, numbers, growing great as quick as possible. And like, yeah, so what does it take?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to the business model, but again, I would argue the case that like, is profit the most important thing? I think in terms of like what you're referring to, it's probably more like the tech or like, especially now like crypto type of business models where like growth is everything. So I come from not a different generation, but like I wasn't developed enough to even consider launching something like that, or even understanding that. I was just trying to make enough money so I could travel, right? So, I mean, so in our little bubble, which is e-commerce, I was very look after costs first. So I've said this thing a few times, but it was almost like I always say to people, like, do a P&L on yourself before you launch a business. So like a lot of people want to launch a business, but maybe the reason is for money. But then like, are they like people, again, you just do it with staff. Like if I have a member of staff and they can look after themselves in their role, then they can look after other people. Like if you want to launch a business, you need to look after yourself first. Like what's your monthly income and what's your savings, and like, how do you spend your time? How do you spend your money? If you can manage that first, you're then probably in a position to launch a business, which then might have more chance of being profitable and run it effectively.
Absolutely. So what do you think is the main difference between the millions of small businesses that do kind of okay-ish, but will always kind of struggle, and a business like yours that you guys started with like 4K and ended up selling to a huge public company like JD Group? A previous point about the scale is like you have to be like, firstly identifying different scalable opportunities. So like for us, it was like different territories and like scaling horizontally as opposed to just vertically in one area. And being able to identify that. So obviously every industry is different, but we saw that social media was like booming for beauty brands, but if it's going to be in the UK, why is it not going to do it in France as well? So like horizontally scaling that way, which a lot of brands I don't see do. I met a guy recently who launched like a trainer business,
And he was like saying to me, like, he didn't seem super happy about it, but he'd done like over $1 million in his first year. And I was like, this is fucking amazing, like, well done. And he was like, how do I go from like 1 to 10? And it's like, well, what are you doing now? Okay, you're selling, how many markets are you selling in? Like 1. Okay, how do you acquire users? Facebook ads. Well, Facebook ads work in every country. So you just need to, you're probably like a translation away from, you're probably like a French translator, like you can probably pay by the hour just to get into France, translate your ads into French. Or it might be Germany, or it might be Italy, or whatever this product that you have can probably sell into more than one market. So like scaling that way is probably the number one thing that I see. But you have to be bothered to do it. Like it's not a nice job. If you've got a running business that's making you like, maybe it's a lifestyle business that's making you enough money to live the life that you want, then great. But if you want more, then it's there. You probably just need to horizontally grow as well as vertically.
Is running a business really as cool as what most people think? And so what I mean by that is, what's the reality of being an entrepreneur in sort of work-life balance? Because we talked about freedom, like you start a business for the freedom, but are you really as free as that? You just said yourself, I'm thinking about this 24/7. And so what do people need to understand before they start whether like a one-man freelance company or a bigger company? Like, again, like first, is it as cool as what most people think? And are you as free as what people think? And what's even the definition of freedom in that case?
Yeah. So this is a bit of a tangent, but to come back to your question in terms of like the freedom thing. So something that happened that I didn't anticipate after I sold majority share. So I'm no longer the majority shareholder of Hairburst. So I would assume that the stake that we sold in the business, I would be that much less bothered about how the performance is. But I'm like just as bothered now, if not more bothered, about how Hairburst performs, even though I own much less share of it now than I used to. And that really confused me because it makes no logical sense. Like the more you own of a company, in theory, you should be that much bothered, more bothered about how it performs. Whereas now I'm almost like super bothered about how it's performing, even though I own less of it. And it's just because I'm probably attached to it in some way, or I feel accountable to maybe other people and all these other things that are going on. But what that's resulted in is mentally I'm not free as I would expect to be after you've just exited a large shareholding. So that's probably something to be expected. I don't know if that's just me or if that's like how it works in general, but yeah, in terms of work-life balance. So what that's resulted in over like a 10-year period for me is there hasn't really been any balance. Is that required? Yes, no. I think you have to have, I think it's healthy to have some element of balance, but ultimately it is going to be a full life thing for most people anyway. And you see that often with most entrepreneurs, right? Everyone's working all different hours until they get to a point where maybe they can cool down a bit. Because you often hear people talk about like meditation and all this kind of stuff, but that generally comes after they've been successful.
Yeah.
You know, like it's me at 22, you probably couldn't tell me to do any of those things because I'm just not even speaking to you because I'm doing the thing, you know. I think that's quite common. But there's definitely some balance in there. But yeah, work-life balance, I don't really believe in it, especially in the startup world.
Yeah. Yeah. How free would you say you are as a business owner versus an employee status? And like freedom is like a freedom of time, freedom of mind. Like often you hear ex-employees who start businesses who said, basically, I left my 9 to 5 to become free, but I'm working now from 8 to 12. Mm-hmm. So like, what do people need to understand? What are basically the benefits of having your own business, which are what people think is the only thing they think of when they start a business? But what are also the other kind of drawdowns or things that you don't necessarily realize before launching the business, but then you're like, fuck, actually, had I known, because for example, me, so many times I was like, I was kind of suffering and I was like, people think it's awesome to have a business, but like you're 24/7 thinking about it, like anytime, like Sometimes you can even connect with friends because you're thinking about your business, or you're with your girlfriends, or whatever, having a dinner, or I don't know, even in bed or whatever, and you think about your fucking business and you can't connect. And for someone else, it's really bad because like they're like, okay, what the hell is going on? And it's not fun to be with someone who is like all the time on another planet. And quite a few times I was just thinking, man, like I wish I just had a normal job where I'm done. I'm going on my weekend. I can enjoy my weekend. I'm going on holidays for 1 or 2 weeks. I'm going on holidays. I'm leaving the office. I'm done until tomorrow. Especially when you deal with, I mean, for us it was more B2B, but you deal with people who are like that. So basically they don't care if it's done tomorrow or in 2 weeks. Whereas you care because if you don't get the thing done, you don't have the money and you don't have the cash, and then you die basically. So like, what's the good and the bad of like, what should people who are employees and just complaining about their life all the time know about being on the other side, you know?
Yeah, I think whether you look at it both ways, like the grass is always greener. So that's like we could talk about that for ages, but that's across like so many different things I've seen. Like I fully believe that's always the case, which is something that people need to not see. But I think, so for me, what caught me off guard is the mental stuff. So for like physically, I was free, right? Because I could travel and do these things, and I can still do that now really. But the mental side is a different game. And I think maybe some people want that and some people don't. I mean, for me, it was always a case that, I mean, I'd always struggled to be an employee. I don't think I could ever do that again. I'd always be like a business owner and do that. I think some people maybe try. I think a lot of people just need to try things for themselves. Like if you always wanted to run a business, then try it. I think you need to have at least 6 months runway and savings to be able to try something. Mentally, it probably can be exhausting. If people are conscious of that, they probably should just try it. And if it doesn't work out for them, then they could be happy doing what they were doing before. Yeah. But for me, I'd always want some skin in the game and be running it for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, awesome. Let's talk about money talks and happiness. So how does your life change the day you wake up with tens of millions in your bank account?
So for me, it was... nothing actually changed at all, to be honest. Like if I talk about the actual day that happened, like it was the most uneventful thing ever, right? But by that point, I already had that middle stage of what everyone talks about, like the day you sell your business, everyone celebrates. That was actually like a slow burning process because I like banked money. So I had a few million put away in passive funds well before we did the deal. So I kind of had all that and went through that like money thing for like slowly, you know? So nothing happened on that day. It was it was like a relief for the thing to be over because we'd done this 18-month thing that finally finished and we planned to sell the business. We'd done it. That was great. But in reality, what's actually happening is, yes, you sell and you get money, but I've basically changed an asset, which is like shares in Hairburst, for cash. And cash is...
which is even worse.
Like cash is, I mean, now at the minute, like, don't want to go into politics, but cash ain't great. So then you have to reallocate that. So what you're actually doing is you're swapping Hairburst shares for shares in an index fund or whatever. So you're kind of just moving things around. Whereas what a lot of people thinking like, oh, if I had like, I don't know, 10 million, I would buy this,
and I would be done. Yeah.
But what are you going to buy? What's actually going to change? Nothing's actually going to change. So it's more of like, I mean, I know some people have sold businesses for like, 10, 50 million or whatever. And 10 years later it's gone because they bought like crazy shit, went to Vegas and spent like all this money and private planes and boats and then all of a sudden it's gone. So I would never be like that. Like I said before, I had like a lot of money saved before we did the deal, and it was always to generate a passive income to spend time doing what I wanted to do. But Yeah, nothing changed. Just moved. It's like still moving assets around, really.
Yeah, which is, it's almost a bit depressing to think about it. Like nothing has changed, but like, what can you tell about? I mean, first, like for example, when you made your first million, like how did it? How did you feel? You know, and by that I mean more. Most of the people think that when they're gonna make their first million, their life is gonna change, or they're gonna be happy, or when they're gonna make their first 5 million or 10 or reach a number, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the case. Like nothing changes. I mean, you might be, if you reach your kind of number and you understand this passive income thing, it's another game. You might be like, as we said before, kind of less stressed out, but you still need to figure out what's going to make you happy, and the money will never be the thing that's going to make you happy. So basically, what can you tell people about how? First, have you, I don't know, read or studied why are people so focused on those kind of numbers? And second, have you also read or researched and kind of mixed with your own experience on why basically this is not the thing that's going to make you happy?
I mean, the world is built around people wanting these things. Like everywhere you go, it's commercials. As soon as you're on Instagram, like you're seeing like all this shit all the time, and like you walk down the street and there's like, buy this for this or this sale or whatever, you know. It's like, it's kind of how the economy works in a lot of ways, which is quite sad. But the way I used to look at money is, it was always, I mean, don't get me wrong, like if you go from like 20k salary, I was on 16k when I was at Phones for You. So you go from that to 50, from 50 to 100k a year. And like these increments are massive, like huge, because you go from being able to save money, being able to like look forward to, like you can see your numbers going up, you can see the growth coming, you can, as long as you, so the first million is like amazing, because you can go, well, if I put $1 million in an index fund and get 7% a year, make 70k a year, forget like crypto stuff where you can get like 15, 20%, whatever. Like if you can get like 70k a year, which is a lot of money to spend, and if you're spending on like crazy stuff, then it's obviously not enough, but 70k, you can live a pretty fulfilled life on 70k, especially if it's passive, you know? So that is big. Anything after that starts to become much less meaningful. And then when you go to tens of millions, it's literally just assets, like I said, moving around. Yeah. Like even if you want like boats and planes and stuff, you're better off renting them anyway, because they're going to go down in value. So like owning a plane is pretty pointless. So if people want to do that, then it's probably maybe not the best place to allocate cash. I don't know.
Yeah, that's actually one of the key points in the Money Master the Game book, where he talks about what's your number. So basically, what is the amount of net worth or wealth that you need to accumulate so that you can live off just the passive income at different levels of life. So just pay your rent, or pay for your whole life, or pay for a much more luxurious life, which depending on where you live and what kind of stuff you want to do. And one of the examples is about this couple that think that they need 10 million to be able to live a pretty lavish lifestyle with like jets and all that stuff. And then he just gets to that number that actually 3 million would be enough if you think about renting the plane instead of buying it and all that stuff, basically. So you always think you need more than you actually need. Mm-hmm. And
it's quite a common thing in e-commerce where, I mean, there's been a few exits that have been like really big in e-commerce brands, and a lot of guys who run e-commerce brands are quite young, right? So, and it's all the Instagram community, everything, and like you always hear like it's 100 mil exits and things like that, but it's realistically like how much do you actually need? And you can actually figure it out, and it's well worth doing, because you can soon realize that, like, I know I'm still talking big numbers, but like a few million, like for example, 10 million in an index fund at 7% a year, like right now, again, inflation and all that, it's not great, but hopefully everything sorts itself out and we get back to normality in some ways. 7% on 10 million is like 700k a year. Like it's like
more than 50k a month. Like what
the hell is going to spend that?
Yeah.
What about if you go getting 15%?
Yeah.
Or like 20%?
Yeah.
It's like 1-2 million a year in passive. Like what the hell? What the hell are you going to do with that? You know,
it's exactly the same thing in crypto. Like you have these kind of the people who just ask, oh yeah, what's financial freedom for you? And you have these guys saying 50 million or 100 million. And then you're like, what the hell? Like if you have 50 million at, let's say 10% in stable coins or 20, that's like 5 to 10 million a year. What are you going to do with that? Like really? And people just, I think the problem is like you just compare yourself to your peers.
Yeah.
And also you always overestimate, often by a long shot, what other people have.
Mm-hmm.
You just think, oh, this person is super successful, like they have massive socials or whatever. They're just whatever, but it's very often much less of the case, basically.
Like if anyone's still listening and are thinking about like how much money they need, I'd suggest going on the internet, going on a compound calculator, putting in like an achievable percentage. I mean, it's all gone into the sky now because of crypto, but it's like if you saved like 2K a month at 10% interest over 50 years or whatever, you end up with like, I'm not going to say a number now and it's going to be wrong, but it's amazing how compound interest works.
So yeah, basically
is what I'm trying to say.
The typical example is kind of, I always tell people, if you're, let's say 25, because 20, you're probably too young to start thinking about that. A few people do. 25, people started to work already. And people of our generation, they're more and more open to all that stuff. So let's say 25, I think is like, if you can save $300 to $400 a month and put them into the S&P 500, that gives you 8% or 7% annualized. And you do it for 25 or 30 years, you're going to be a millionaire. Mathematically, you will. And like, I mean, it depends the country, of course, but like in most kind of developed countries, like people can save $200 or $300 a month. Like literally, like it's what 1 or 2 nights out that you just put in the beginning when you receive a salary directly into an index fund or Bitcoin or ETH. Might talk about that later. And that's just compounding over time. And the entire thing about just calculating what do I need per month, depending on where I live, being pretty humble about it. Okay, if I live in, I don't know, Singapore or London, like $2,000 a month might be difficult. Or in Dubai, if I have a family. But like if I can move anywhere, basically. And so then I just multiply this amount monthly into yearly by 12. And then basically I can divide by my expected return, which is, let's say, 7-8%, depending. And then I get this, basically, what's my number? And then I work towards it by using a calculator, component calculator, and seeing, okay, if I invest more every month or if I get a better rate of return, I'm going to get to that number faster. And basically, I'm going to be done after that.
I think it all comes down to, which is like all about mindset before, as people go through that stage, like the only thing that's stopping that is through social games, which is like they're spending money not for themselves and they're not investing in themselves, they're investing in other people's perceptions of themselves, which is like, if you, like it's so common, right? And it's also like, it's probably changing more now because there's so much more information out there, but if you earn 40K, you spend 40K. If you earn 80K, you spend 80K. Yeah. Especially in places like London, like if people are on these 150K salaries, they won't have anything left afterwards because they buy in bags and watches and And before you know it, there's no
plan B.
They're growing with their salary.
Yeah.
And it's for what though? Like for me, like if you, again, like investing in material objects, you're investing in, like maybe you really like that, but I just look at a lot of things, which is quite sad. But if you go, okay, this watch or whatever, is that better there or is it better in a fund for the next 30 years? And what is that going to mean? You know, like a 10K watch or a 20K watch, like if you put that in a fund now, 30 years time, it's going to be worth exponentially more. I mean, watches are going up really fast now anyway, but for the next 30 years, it's not going to continue like this. But yeah, and that's just getting that mindset of a relationship with money, like a positive relationship with money. Yeah, it's quite important.
Absolutely. So you said basically you've retired basically on paper when you're 25, 6, 7, 27. So basically what we're talking about now is exactly principle of investing and building wealth. Can you tell us how you developed your investing skills and how did you even get into the idea of I need to invest? Because the main issue is, in my case, it was setting up a pension fund for our first company, for our employees, and for ourselves because we're employees of the business, and thinking what's the best pension scheme. And then you all started from there. And then I discovered by reading just a few books, Money Master the Game, Unshakable, both by Tony Robbins. One is called A Random Walk Down Wall Street. I mean, they all say the same, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's you invest yourself, you do it yourself, you invest in low-cost, diversified index funds, and you never sell, basically, and you invest every month. And then I was like, oh, that's okay. I need to find a pension fund that lets me invest myself and the employees themselves into this fund. So I need to have the control over what I invest in, and it needs to be low cost, because if you understand compounded interest, you need to understand that the cost or the fees compound in time. And so if I have some hidden cost because a banker or an asset manager is taking care of my money and they kind of charge hidden fees or whatever they need to pay themselves, all this money they take from you for their own life, which is fair because they need to have a life, is actually not compounding in your favor, is kind of compounding against you. And then a difference of 1 or 2 or 3% in the performance means that in 30 years, instead of having 1 million or 2 million, I have half of that. 500K or whatever, 200K or 300K, depending on how much I invested. And so, which means that I either cannot retire, or either I could have retired much earlier if I knew about all that stuff and I just had the right setup in the beginning, or I'm just going to have to retire but take the risk of running out of money. So what made you understand all this stuff or get more interested into this stuff and really wanted to kind of sharpen your investing skills?
I think I always wanted to do the travel lifestyle and stuff, and it was all about like passive income, that kind of conversation. I think let's say I was 25, 26, and by this point I was making like really, really good money. And I can't actually remember the first investment book I read, but I was always like interested. I mean, it probably came from Google, to be honest. Like I always hear like, oh, the rich get richer, or like all these different things that you hear. And I was like, why? Like, why does this happen? Why does that happen? And then I started to get I was really big on Warren Buffett for a while, trying to understand like, so he compounded like 20% a year. And like, I don't know. I think I was always worried that I kind of went through a phase of like, make enough money to be free. Right. Then you go, okay, how do you keep that? Like, how do you continue to do that? Like, how do I make sure when I'm like 50 or 60, this is going to continue to like fund me? And I was always, when my first business was working, I was always so scared of like, get it. And then, because one thing, when you don't have it, you want to get it. And when you have it, you don't want to lose it. So you kind of have like all these different anxieties that go on. Like, first of all, you don't have it, so you really want to get it. And then you get it and you're like, oh, what can I do to not have to worry about money again? And I found myself looking at different investment stuff. And then I just went through all the different books that you've mentioned and many more. And it was quite apparent that, yeah, you have to have money in markets. You have to invest, in cash is shit, basically. And so I think it probably came out of paranoia is where it came from, of not having it.
Okay. And so you said cash is shit, you have to invest. That's something super important, because like when I talk to people today and kind of like trying to help them about like the develop these skills of investing and what works and what has been proven to work, most of them, they ask me, but Kevin, if you tell me to invest a certain amount every month for the rest of my life, when do I sell? Like, I want to be able to enjoy. Or what? Am I doing all this stuff just for my kids to have a better life, but I'm never going to be able to enjoy it? And while doing all that stuff, I was thinking the same. I was like, when the hell is it going to... I mean, what's even the point? Like, I'm suffering all this time for what? And so now that you said cash is shit, basically, like, can you explain the concept of, and probably it took me years to get there, like to understand like that you basically never sell. Like, as you said, it's a transfer from one asset to another. Yeah. And you need to understand what basically can store value in time. But the things that can store value in time are by definition volatile. They're going to change in value. And so what's the kind of mindset that people need to understand about when they ask you, when do I sell?
So I think, going back like a layer below, so when people say, when do I get to sell? So they have a misconceived belief that when they do sell and they get the cash, they're going to be able to buy these things and that's going to be a good, better result when it's actually not. Like, again, like everyone's an individual case, but for me, like when we sold our business and we got cash, I haven't bought a single thing. I've said this before, but like the only thing I bought within like 2 months of selling was like a new Apple Watch strap that was like, didn't even fit my watch. It was like £7 of Amazon. Because somebody asked me on another podcast, and they're like, what did you buy? And like, I'm not like, do you know what I mean? I'm not like a saint, like don't get me wrong. Like when I was 26 or 27, I bought like a Lambo, and like I bought like watches in the past, and I've done that kind of stuff. But fortunately, what that basically taught me was it's all bullshit.
What did you learn about buying a Lambo when you were 27 years old?
So, well, it's just, I mean, it was like on the day I got it, I had loads of fun, right? But I've kind of gone through that now, and you're never gonna be able to sit and say, don't do that, because like my brother's here today. I bet he would probably do the same. But it's like people see it, grass is always greener. Oh, they've got that, I want that, have it. Oh, it doesn't actually mean anything, right? And then you kind of find yourself in the state where I'm in now, where you get paid all this money and I don't buy anything because it's actually meaningless. I'd much rather, like, I feel better doing exercise. I feel better having a good golf round or whatever, you know? Yeah. Like it's people's relationship with money and attached and misheld beliefs that those things are good. When they are, it's nice to do, right? But it's not, no way would you ever sacrifice like not having to work or like having passive income that makes you sleep at night like great, because you know that every day you make a few K or whatever it is on funds, you know? So what would I say to people? That probably that kind of stuff. Is that answer the question? No.
I just need to remember the question actually, but
yeah.
But I think it's good because we're talking about like the most important stuff. The most important thing is why sell ever? Why ever sell?
Yeah, and then I think you mentioned about like the volatility of any asset, but cash goes like this.
Yeah,
and then assets go like this.
Yeah, but on average, they go up versus cash because money is being printed.
Yeah.
So you don't want cash basically.
You don't want cash. I think. But
maybe as a kind of summary before you continue, these people who ask when do I sell, basically, you don't sell and you continue to invest and to reinvest the dividend and the interest and all that stuff to compound your wealth until it grows big enough so that you can live off the passive income, even despite the volatility. Meaning your portfolio might grow to, 1 million, but with the volatility, because market move up and down, it might go down to, let's say, 500K. If you earn, let's say, 10%, at 500K, you still have 50K a year. So is it 50K a year enough for you to stop completely working? If not, you continue to work. Mm-hmm. But maybe you work half time, or you find something that you love more that gives you less money. You need to be always very flexible and understand that it takes time, but that also you're not going to sell, because if you're going to sell, it's what do I sell into? And if you think that selling into cash is the thing that makes sense, you probably need to educate yourself much more about the evolution of cash purchasing power, which basically, I think the average lifespan of a fiat currency, so dollar, pound, and all that stuff is about 27 years. So most of them, they go to zero within 27 years. And the ones that are the most successful, like the dollar or the Swiss franc or the pound or the euro, probably down 99% in the last 100 years. Mm-hmm. So is it something that if you're building all this wealth again, it's not going to last if you just have cash?
Yeah, it's not even a choice.
It's not even a choice,
exactly.
Have a choice.
I mean, yeah, everything has to move into assets. But I do think, again, like going back to basics, like the mindset of cash is what is causing a lot of the problems, which is all based on how the economy is set up with advertising and everything else. I mean, I know you're never going to be able to change people's opinions on that. People are going to, if someone wakes up tomorrow with £1 million and they didn't have any before, then people are probably going to buy a nice car. That's the reality of it. But in terms of a lifetime's earnings, because I know we're talking about things like watches and cars, and a lot of these things are crazy for people to think about, right? But if you think of your money over a whole lifetime, because some people might get, like that sort of money at a young age, people might get it when they're first 50 or 60 or whatever, and everyone goes through the same emotional stages. But I think just keeping that bit to a minimum, like, okay, people need to buy a nice car and buy a nice watch and get like whatever and go on these crazy nights or whatever, and then it's done. But you could maybe, that might be a waste of like 100k, and then just have it at that. If people are going like well beyond that, then it's probably more of a mental challenge that people need to approach. But for me, it was fairly easy.
Okay, awesome. So what are the most important things that millennials and Gen Z should know about investing to build wealth and reach financial freedom early?
I think there's a famous quote, probably Warren Buffett or somebody, but it was something like, start early. The key to being wealthy is starting early and living long or something.
Yeah.
Have you read that one? Was it Charlie Munger or something like that? And I think
Which basically means that in investing, time is your biggest...
so start early.
Yes, it's basically your biggest... I mean, time is on your side, basically.
Yeah.
And the earlier you start, the more you can compound your wealth. And because compounding is basically exponential, much more in the end, you want to start as early as possible.
So I think that's probably number one. Number two is like, again, it comes down to mindset, the world's literally, people are fighting against it now. So like I don't use TikTok, but I can tell it's addictive as hell. Like you can't learn how to build a business off TikTok. Probably number two. Like you see so much information out there, but like long form content, podcasts, books, these sort of things are like really important for like gaining deep understanding into things. Get rich quick is like, I don't know how long this is, but it just seems to get exponentially bigger every year. Like you'd assume now that the amount of information out there that people would not buy into this stuff, but they do. And there's always a new way to do that. So it's like long-term thinking,
so basically you're saying that anything that is a get rich quick scheme or any kind of courses or online thing where you can learn how to become rich quickly or how to automate passive income or is basically a scam. But people just fall for it all the time. And thanks to that, the people who build this stuff actually make money.
Yeah. I mean, that's true.
It's the classic online marketing thing where basically the person sells you a lifestyle. I don't know, building an Amazon business or whatever, consulting business on Facebook, whatever. And they sell you how to acquire all these clients. But the reason they themselves make their money is not because they made it, it's because you're buying a course from them. And selling these courses online is very scalable.
But the problem with those things is people actually want to believe it though. So that's why they buy into it. Because one, you've got someone telling you it. Two, that person actually wants to believe it. So you've got all these things people are playing against. And then you've got like, I do, what's interesting with Gen Z is like, so for example, just take an example like in the beauty industry. So, I mean, us millennials and like other generations, like they believe the media and they would just buy products without looking too deep into it. Like Gen Z in the beauty industry, they will want to know every ingredient in every product and they understand the different parts and they don't want to buy shit basically and they know what's good and what's bad. I'd like to think that the amount of information that's out there, there's kind of two different stages. There's one is like everyone's inundated with so much information they don't know what to do. But the second thing is people starting to learn how the media works and how like you can't believe everything you read. You have to second guess everything. There's always a second opinion or third opinion. And I mean, social media did enable that. That's now changing a bit because things are getting a bit strange. But I'd like to think that that's how things will progress, where you do take into consideration various different sources rather than just believing like one thing. So that's something to, if you don't think like that, that's probably a good way to go, is taking various different opinions on a certain subject. And I can guarantee if you're going to buy into a get rich quick scheme, if you type that person's name in and they go onto the website, it's going to be amazing. But I can guarantee there's probably a YouTube video on that particular person that says it's not as good as it is and here's the evidence why. I mean, there's loads of YouTube videos out there now. There's a channel called, it's called Coffeezilla.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? It's awesome. He just
I was
everything's a scam.
actually
He just
thinking
calls
about
it.
him when you were talking about there's probably a channel somewhere that's gonna basically shit on you. Like I was thinking about him.
Yeah. I mean, again,
Coffeezilla, yeah, it's awesome.
I mean, that's a particular one that was quite good that I've watched, but I mean, it's still like this whole scammy like TikTok thing, like the amount of coins that's been pumped through influencers is like insane. Like they're all now getting into trouble, and there's been law cases and all this kind of stuff. But I don't know. So the overall message from that is, just focus on the core principles of like long-term thinking, deep information, into building wealth rather than all this noise, which inevitably is going to be in your face because as soon as you go onto TikTok or Instagram, it's all there. But you just have to.
Which applies to everything: building a business, investing, building relationships with people, and in investing in normal assets, but also in crypto. People think they can make so much money in 2 or 3 days or in 3 weeks because, I mean, probably we're all these kind of gambling addicts. And so like we have this appeal when we see these people like basically shilling the hell out of a coin or just saying, oh yeah, you need to buy that without actually knowing, or maybe you even know that they're being paid behind or paid in the, but you just want to, as I said before with the online courses, you really want to believe it. And I don't know where this comes from, but actually, if you're going to be successful in investing, especially in crypto, because in crypto you have much more of this pump and dump stuff, is by restraining yourself from buying this shit when everybody's screaming about it, basically. And that's when you're going to know that you're on the right path. But it's very difficult to do because we all I fell for it so many times. I think you just fall for it and you just lose all your money every time. And if you're not too stupid, you just realize, oh, I've lost my money 5 times by buying all this shit that everybody's screaming about. All these influencers are talking about that stuff. Actually, maybe if I want to not lose all my money, I should just stop listening to all these idiots who make much more money from their channel than from the actual thing itself. And then you can apply it, if you think even deeper. I mean, we're just completely going off, but anyway, you can apply this to anything in life because, like for investing, like you go to a financial advisor, you're listening to someone to advise you to retirement or build retirement, but they're not retired. They're not retired. Or you might go to, I don't know, a doctor because you have cancer, but like, would you rather go to someone who cured their cancer without being a doctor, or would you go to a doctor? Probably in that case, you go to both. But there's so many things that just don't make any sense. People just basically selling you things that they just didn't have achieved themselves. And so I think like the biggest thing that people should really think about is this person actually trying to make money or not? The best example for that is Naval Ravikant. He's just saying like, go listen to my podcast 3 hours and a half about how to build wealth and be happy and all that stuff. He says, I'm never gonna charge anything because people who charge, people who need to charge you for an advice, it means they don't have the money. They haven't done it. They haven't made it. If they've made it, why would they even charge you? But everybody does that. And so, and even thinking even further, I'm struggling to understand. I don't know, like I don't want to give names, but like all these super famous people who now are selling online courses, like why do they do that? I don't understand. Like, is this greed? Is this like why? Like you have the wealth, or maybe you have the social capital, but you don't have the actual wealth. I don't know, But I mean, I'm going to give you just one example. Is this guy? But there's so many. I don't know, like for example, Jordan Peterson. Like I have just these ads all the time for his course, and like, why do you do that? If you were like multi-millionaire or like, why do you do that? Just do this for free. Like help people out. And I mean,
I really like him. I hope that's not true.
I mean, I don't know, but like, I don't really know what he's doing, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I just see him all the time, and I'm like, why is this guy selling something? Like some people might say, if you don't charge for it, people will not take you as seriously. But I don't understand the principle of if you've made it, why would you ever charge for whatever you do if you don't need it, you know?
Do you know what's really sad as well is, so we spoke about Money Masters the Game. Like, that was like a life-changing book for me. And that was by Tony Robbins. And as I've got older, I'm like, why is he charging like 10K for these courses that like change people's lives? And I'm like, this is like I love, like when I hear Tony Robbins speak, I feel like amazing. Like he's, like if you're talking about a motivational speaker, he is the original motivational speaker, and he's written these books about money, and he's positively changed my life, right? So you could probably argue that it's worth 10K. It's probably worth loads more than 10K, right?
Yeah. But if he's worth 500 million, why do you
But it irks me a little bit that he does charge that, because there's people, I've seen that there's a documentary as well, I'm Not Your Guru or something like that. But like these people go to these courses. Yeah. But people go to these things and their whole life is changed. Like people are crying in the audience. But it's 10K. It's like 10K is a lot of money for people to be spending on. Yeah,
you're pressing out most of the people who can't afford it, but like
you probably need it the most.
Need it the most. And that's, I mean, we'll continue but that's something I just don't understand. Like if you've made it and you're so rich or wealthy or whatever, and you have all this kind of knowledge, at some point, like if we talk about happiness and the thing that's going to make you happy is actually this thing that we call spirituality, which is thinking higher than yourself. I mean, okay, you might say, I need some to build a better production or something. I need some people around me, so I need to pay them. But again, like the 10K thing is just completely unjustified if you're trying to make the world a better place. Absolutely. It makes no sense. Okay, cool. So basically, kind of linked to that. First, what's enough? You know, and is there such thing as enough money? And of course, this is going to depend on the people. But like, again, Tony Robbins, in all his books, he's preaching like the financial freedom, but then he talks about the happiness, and he's talking about these guys who are multi-billionaire and who's never going to be happy. Mm-hmm. So what's enough? Is there such thing as enough?
100%.
Money?
Yeah. So for me, it's like, I don't think I'll spend more than, bear in mind, I literally do whatever I want, really. I don't think I'll spend, like, bear in mind what I've just gone through and like what I've done in my 20s to get to this position in life. Like, I probably won't spend more than 100K this year, I don't think.
Yeah.
Bear in mind my passive income's in like the hundreds of thousands. Well, probably more like millions now every year.
Yeah.
And that's not because, but I know people have burn rates every year of like 500, 600, 700K every year. But then where I see that going is just like shit.
Yeah.
So enough, like, I guess the question is enough to be happy. Yeah. I mean, basic needs are covered.
Yeah.
You can travel anywhere in the world whenever you want. Business class. Like,
you have better experiences, basically. But you can't have more than better experiences.
There's no exponential growth after that for me. Like there really isn't. And so what's enough? I mean that, but then that, and again, do you know what I mean? Like, you think about the whole world, like that amount of money per year is like in the top 0.00001%. Because you think about like people in business, and you think about people in like all the different countries all over the world. And I mean, I don't know what, I can imagine the top 1% is probably like 40K or something. If you think about the whole world, you know, just think how lucky we are, first of all, to even be talking about this subject. Second thing is, that's definitely enough. And if that's not enough, then you're probably trying to fulfill a other issue that's not actually related to money at all. It might be an insecurity. It might be a misheld belief around someone else's opinion, or maybe you're hurt about something that's happened in the past, and then it comes into all that extra stuff.
Or the circle of people you hang out with, and we're just like doing better on paper. It becomes a competition, which is again back to the unhealthy mindset of like comparing yourself to others.
And like enough, like there's another quote as well, I keep forgetting them, but it's like you can almost like people do get to a position where they can like alleviate all wants. So enough is actually like nothing. Like that is possible to get to that mindset where like I like to fly business class when I fly because I have a bit of a bad back. I don't like sitting down for a long period of time. But I could remove that. I could remove that from my mindset and I could just fly economy everywhere.
Yeah.
You know? Like it's the same with everything. Like it's more about enough is a question around someone's mindset as opposed to like an actual number. It's just that that's the number that I've got to. And I think in the context of this podcast, it's very achievable with like e-commerce, crypto and all these other things that we've discussed. So I feel a bit of a dick saying that because it is a lot of money for a lot of people, right? But in the context of what we're talking about, it's probably a smaller amount than what people would say.
Yeah, yeah.
Is what I'm trying to get at.
And when you say like enough, sometimes it's just nothing. Like I had this guest on who's called Loic Lemeur, who basically is a big Web 1, Web 2 entrepreneur and early investor in LinkedIn and built like massive businesses. And basically he just said at some point, I just realized most of my friends, they never had enough. And he owns a private jet and all that stuff. I was like, but I was not happy, or I was not getting happier. I was like, that's not it. So what he said is he's just going for a month every year to the Amazon forest, living with tribes. And there enough is nothing. And he's just saying like, sometimes we have nothing and I'm so happy there. It's just a question of perspectives and context. And sometimes he goes to the next level and he says, during 4 days, I'm not going to eat anything and I'm not going to drink anything. So I have no water and no food for 4 days. And like, I mean, you trip out and all that stuff, but like, he's just saying like, you just all about perspective and you're just like escaping this bubble of like bullshit, basically. And in that case, enough is basically nothing.
The main word that keeps into mind we're talking about is just perspective.
Yeah.
It's perspective. And I think there's also another thing, which is like a common thing, which is like practicing poverty, which is kind of what he's doing there. And I did by accident once when I was in Bali, because I'm an investor in an English school there. So I like help fund various different things there. And sometimes when I go over, they offer me to stay. And I'd rather stay in the nice hotel that's like 30 miles away. But there's a few times I have done it and I've stayed in like these huts it's in Lombok. And the first time I did it, I didn't realize what I was getting myself in for. But you kind of like, they don't sit on chairs, they just sit on the floor and they just use their hands to eat. So like within like 2 minutes, my back's like killing me. I'm like, I can't like focus or anything, but you kind of get used to that. And then you appreciate a chair. Yeah. Like how stupid is that, right? And then I can remember when I slept, I had they brought through like what I was going to sleep on. And it was just a mattress cover, Man United mattress cover, but there's no mattress in it. So we just laid on the floor. And I'm like there, and I got eaten by ants like all night, and then like the next night I slept like a baby, and it was like, oh my God, like a bed, you know?
That's crazy, yeah.
And I think if you're getting caught up in all that stuff, you need to go sleep on a concrete floor and get eaten by ants. And it's called, the term for it is practice poverty.
Practice poverty.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So how do you keep motivated and find meaning in life after making all this money?
Good question. How do you feel motivated with life?
How do you stay motivated?
So,
because we're all
the goalposts change, right? Because if you're chasing money, then that's inevitably going to hit some kind of fault. So, I mean, I've spent a lot of time over the last year, like really trying to understand. And again, when I go back to that, when I was 27, I realized I was financially free. That's like 6 years ago now. So I've had a lot of time to like develop what mattered. And it came down to like, money's not the most important thing. And that's when we did sell the business. And I got all this, I went into a whole different world of money. It didn't really change anything because that was not my core focus. So I guess it's really understanding and spending time like who you are as a person and what you really get excited by. So I know like from speaking to you love doing this podcast and speaking to people, right? So you've kind of like repurposed and found something that you really enjoy. For me, I really like helping people. I really like having interesting chats. So for me, like doing angel investments is quite a cool thing because I get to speak to a business owner. I get to learn about them as a person. I get to learn how they deal with their issues. I get to understand doing that's like been really cool. when I was a kid, I have this theory about like when people are kids, like what's your decision making process as a kid. So when I was like 6 or 7, and my decision making process of what I'm going to do for the next hour is what's fun. Yeah. So like for me at the time, it was playing football and computer games, playing Sonic on the Sega Mega Drive or whatever it was. So I try and think about things a bit more simpler, like what's actually fun and what do I actually enjoy, and focus on those things to stay motivated. Because I'm really motivated by doing things that I enjoy.
Absolutely.
And as a kid, that's your decision making process. So maybe going back to that a bit more rather than,
rather than the next massive thing that is just going to be more stress and more,
Yeah.
Awesome. Education. So you didn't do great at school, but you went to use, you went on to use the new social media mega trend to start an awesome business. So what do you think about the education system in the early 2010s? And what are your thoughts today? And the entire goal here is kind of, if there is some parents listening here, or even us as parents, basically the next question will be, what will you do with your kids regarding education? If you have kids, like what's your thinking about basically the entire education system, how it was back then, how we evolved, and put this in parallel with the evolution of the technology and how it's all changing the game in terms of career, whether building businesses or just like building skills to develop a career.
So I think the number one way to think about education, which is maybe quite difficult for people who are like, again, like going on about the new generation of like TikTok and all this kind of stuff, you get easily distracted. But it's like, what's going to be most important for people from their education is their application of their time into various, because it's all there now. The difference between when we was at school, like we're talking about primary and secondary school, and we're talking about like, I guess in like the Western world, so we're talking about like, you've got access to a computer, basically. If you're at that point, then the time spent in school is going to be very difficult to change. But if we could change it, then it'd probably be more understanding of like financial stuff, because that's how the world goes around. That's how you build your lifestyle, all around finances. Yet there's very limited things taught about that. So if we could change that, then great. Let's introduce some of the stuff we talked about today regarding like passive income, how money works, how the economy works when it comes to like personal finances would be much more important. But the difference now is the level of information available and sifting through the bullshit is another point. But the third point is the application into wanting to learn this kind of stuff. Because I know people who just don't really want to learn about this stuff, right? So do they want to learn? Maybe, but it's all about allocating time to learn and understand. So I think, if going back to me as a parent, I think the number one thing is access. So giving opportunity to learn. But I think developing the capacity to want to learn is probably the number one thing that I would want to provide in some capacity.
How would you do that?
So again, I think Naval talks about this, and I've already mentioned it when I talked about like, I read the Paul Gascoigne book. So the first book that I read was really fun to read, completely by chance. My dad had it. I picked it up one day and I really enjoyed it. But having fun learning, number one, then probably enables like further learning down the line. How do you enable that to happen? It's a pretty tough question.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know how I would answer. I think it's developing that. And like Naval said that he loved it and he developed a learning for it. And again, I'm going on about it again, but like reading for me was always big and still is big now. I think he says
developing the learn for loving.
Yeah, I think he says read what you love until you love reading or something like
exactly that. So I loved football. So I read a book about a footballer. I loved it. And I got from cover to cover and I really enjoyed reading. So I actually did that completely by accident. Like you have to have a bit of luck, and things like that are so lucky. Like I could have picked up my first book and I hated it. I actually tried to read Harry Potter when I was a kid, and I got bored after the first page. I was like, I'm never reading another book. But then happened to be reading that one, so yeah, that's quite a good one. I mean, I don't know what school's going to be like now / 10 years, but just think of all the personalization and decentralization of education. The whole world's going to change. Like people in Indonesia should have the same access to schooling as people in the UK. If they haven't already, I'm sure in some private schools in different parts of the world, they probably do have it, but it's going to change the job market. So there's a lot to think about with that.
What would you tell parents today about how this internet and mobile waves just change the whole game in terms of career possibilities? You know, if you still have some, I think parents probably have to today realize and kind of acknowledge how this changed the game. But if you still have some people, you know, for you it was 10 years ago, so like that's, you know, like how did you even go about, like, I don't know, justifying to your parents, or were they just open mind, or just maybe just didn't understand anything, just like just do whatever you feel like?
Yeah,
you know, like, yeah, what would you tell parents, like, if you had to explain, hey, look, like, I mean, you can say, look, I've built this massive business that I sold to this massive group.
So there's two sides to the coin. So the one side of the coin is, I honestly reckon, this is like a big thing, but playing Age of Empires as a kid and playing poker as a kid resulted in my ability to run a business in some ways. Now, I'm pretty sure if I was playing that for 6-7 hours a day, my parents would get my back and say, "Oh, go outside or do something else." But I really enjoyed doing that. Like another example is like we went to our friend's wedding, Charles, 2 days ago, and he's like a super successful guy in the crypto world, and he used to smash World of Warcraft like crazy, you know. And I've heard that many times.
Yeah. I mean, basically, the crypto guys who are the most successful, they're either gamers or poker players.
Yeah. So
they're poker players.
So you're enabling, you're facing challenges and you're enabling it through different mechanics, just so, and then you can reapply that later in life. So that's point number one. And point number two is the bullshit side, which again, I'm going on about it before, but like the TikTok side. So what I used to do was, this is like during my poker days, but I would literally like break up my days and have like, I used to have a journal, this is a bit weird actually, the more I think about it, but I would literally have like a day journal. I used to track the time that I spent. So I'd be like, okay, so I sleep 8 hours probably. So I've got 16 hours. I've got this much time to learn about stuff, this much time where I'll be at work, and this much time to like do whatever. And it's all available now on your screen time. So like absorbing is not probably the best thing when it comes to like social media, but if you're actively involved in like problem solving / game / learning, that's actually a completely different thing. So, I mean, I'm not a parent, so I'm probably not the best person to answer, but I think that is kind of, there's so many people who've played these games or whatever and been successful. It's not like it is a real thing. And I think it's because you're constantly problem solving and doing that kind of stuff. So that's useful, but at the same time, there's loads of other shit that's not useful. So identifying the difference between the two is probably quite a good thing. And then, I mean, God knows how much understanding of those types of things is going to be even more important going forward with all this crazy metaverse / computer stuff going on, you know? So I think you have to be welcoming to it as opposed to the opposite.
Okay. Awesome. So basically this kind of, I think it wraps up this part about like the mobile era that we basically call also Web 2 that created totally new jobs we've seen and new businesses we've seen with your example. And that basically no level of education could have prepared you for, you know, like all these Instagrammers, YouTubers, podcasters, influencers, like even influencers that became much more famous than the previous generation of celebrities. And so basically this leads us to pretty beautifully to the next topic, where all the same is happening again, which basically is Web3 and crypto. So now we have this Web3 thing that is creating yet again a whole set of new jobs, such as, probably NFT collectors, yield farmer, like whatever. And again, we have this pattern where no education could prepare anyone for that. And it's creating the biggest technological adoption that we've ever seen by a factor of 2. So basically, it's going twice as fast as the internet was growing. And internet was really the thing that grew the fastest before that. And equally important, if not more, it's basically creating the largest wealth transfer or wealth building opportunity that we've ever seen before, especially for young technology savvy ones, as we just talked about, with this basically link to gamers and people who spend a lot of time on computers. So let's talk very briefly about crypto. What's your understanding of crypto?
So my understanding most comes from people like you and our group of friends. It probably stemmed from FOMO to start with. But my understanding of crypto is, the way I view it is almost like it's a hedge against the world, number one. Number two, it's part of my portfolio. And I feel like I've got to a position where I have a good understanding of which assets are worth holding and which aren't. And I set and leave it like I would do with funds. So that's kind of where it came from. The more I learn about it, the more I'm excited about it. When you look at stablecoin, like Warren Buffett compounded at 20% per year, and he was like probably one of the best ever. And I can just literally shove it in like a yield farming app, for example, and just I know there's no regulation, all this extra risks that come with it, but my understanding is just seeing it as an asset and something that I need to hold to be able to be balanced.
So what's your approach? Like as a young high net worth individual, what's your concrete approach towards the field? What do you say? I'm going to allocate a percentage of my whole net worth. It's going to be that much. I'm going to rebalance. I'm just going to see how much it evolves. And what are the few projects or coins or that you're invested in, and why? Yeah.
So I would say, I initially planned to have about 5% of my net worth in crypto. It's now about 10%. It may increase. So, I literally just hold, it's dead simple asset allocation. So I have Bitcoin, ETH and Luna. And then I hold quite a lot of stable coins in various different yielding wallets. So it's more of a set and forget than buy and sell or any of that kind of stuff. I take the same approach to crypto as I do with my normal stocks and investments. I don't proclaim to be an expert in that, but I think the way that I approach it is probably the healthiest way to do it in terms of holding. And I kind of try and take in various different opinions like we spoke about earlier. I speak to people like you, obviously heavy in crypto, and you'll have your point of view. And then I'll see, most recently, people even Kevin O'Leary, who's on Shark Tank. It's not a great example, but he's got his own YouTube channel now, and he's more of the old school investment style. So I don't know what you would recommend, and you're really high net worth in crypto, right? So yours is super high. Kevin O'Leary's at 5%. So I kind of go in between and take a bit of an in between area. So that's my approach to it. I could look back in 10 years and think I should have been 50% net worth in crypto. That's probably what you would say. What do you think's right? Net worth crypto, would you say?
I think it really depends on how much net worth you have and how much risk tolerance you have. And volatility tolerance you have. Mm-hmm. And basically how much you spend so much time in the field that it becomes a no-brainer. Mm. Because nothing... they always say the more information you have, the less diversified you have. Mm-hmm. You are, sorry. And it all comes down to conviction, but the conviction is being built by spending lots of time and understanding everything and not panicking if everything goes down 80%, which is happening pretty often in crypto. And again, taking, I don't know, you have a certain number that you reach, and then you say, okay, actually this number if I take 20% of that number, I can still cover all my life with passive income. So the other 80%, what's the maximum I can put in a very volatile environment by keeping the other percentage, let's say 20% or 50% or whatever, that yield me in a pretty safe fashion passive income that's enough to.
I think what causes a lot of the stress with crypto is the accessibility to information on it. So like Luna today, for example, is up 24%. Like I've got friends who invest, who like run like family offices and stuff like that. And like, again, like yesterday, so the FTSE was down like 4% and the world goes insane. Like, yeah, Luna's up 24% today. It could be down 30% tomorrow. Yeah. And it only takes time, but I'm actually now completely numb to it, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But that's just comes from, but then when you look at the whole market and go, oh, well, I mean, you can have these like 4 or 5x years with some assets, but it comes with volatility. So you just have to, it comes with the territory really. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you've witnessed first-hand Web 2 and you massively benefited from it. I mean, you took advantage of it. How big do you think this Web 3 crypto thing is and why?
The biggest part for me, which is I'm most excited about, is like around community and around like the shared benefit of various different projects. So like the way that business has been built always is like shareholders are the main beneficiary, or you have like 1 or 2 main beneficiaries in a certain business or whatever. And that's been actually enabled further by the internet in general, because it's the centralization of the internet where people can access more customers across more markets, but it's still only 1 or 2 beneficiaries. So that's actually not decentralized, because you kind of pool the money into one space. So like Silicon Valley, for example, those business models can cover the whole world, but still only 1 or 2 beneficiaries. Whereas this whole new world is enabling the opposite of that. So it's actually becoming more accessible to everybody in some ways, but other ways not. So, I mean, I saw Jack from Twitter post something the other day about Web3 and how it's like just becoming like a massive, like basically the VCs in Silicon Valley are just going to eat it all up. But I think there's good sides to it where, yeah, you can have more of a community feel, and it does become more decentralized, and more people can benefit from it in a way, with tokenization and everything else. So that's really cool. But I think it's all to be seen, right? Absolutely.
There's a lot of promises, and there's the kind of philosophical aspect that's beautiful, but then there's a difference between the hopes and the actual execution and how the thing is going to evolve. Absolutely. I think we'll just go with the last 2 questions, which first one is, what's your definition of happiness?
I feel like I should have prepared for this question. I think being able to spend time doing what you want to do every day. Maybe a good place to start.
That's simple. Playing golf every day for the rest of your life.
Yeah, being able to do what you do every day and be free. But free, as we've discussed, freedom comes in many different forms. Which is capital, mental, physical, everything. So freedom's a big part of it.
Yeah, so being in a good, basically mental health place, physical health place, and financial health place. Awesome. Finally, what is it to be in your mind? What is it to be in your mind? What's it like? Yeah.
My personal mind?
Yeah. So people might think, oh, this guy, he's just like so successful, like he just made it and all that stuff. But like, what would you say? You know, you always, it's another Naval thing, basically. Like you see someone who's super successful, but you need to take their life, but not only the successful side, you need to take everything from their life. Would you do it? You know? So like...
And people don't know.
People don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
So like that's the
I got the question. So a good way to describe it is, let me think. What's that to bear in mind? It's probably quite a stressful place to be. And to give people context, like I spend a lot of time trying to, and I have done over the last 10 years, because I've obviously had I've probably gone through quite a lot of stressful things building a business at such a young age, right? But I spend a lot of time really trying to nail down like mood. So what that tells people is I'm not always in a good mood. It's not always like, I don't wake up every day because I'm now rich and everything's great. Like I spend a lot of time investing in trying to understand like what makes me feel good. And it's really simple. It's like exercise, spending time with friends, having good conversations or whatever. Because a lot of the time when I'm doing all the work stuff, it's obviously not always that fun. So I would say it's pretty chaotic, bit of a roller coaster, but overall, pretty fun. And the way I try and live my life is like and this is like something that I think about a lot, and it's something that I kind of try and live by is if I like died next year, like when my best friend got ill and that happened, really was a bit of a wake up call at 25, like holy shit, this can happen to anybody. And if I got really ill next week and found out I've only got a year left or something, I think I'd probably go to think about it and think, oh yeah, I've had a pretty fulfilled life. So that's a good place to be.
Awesome. So basically it's a self-awareness journey that's kind of never ending, because that's a beautiful thing about it. You can just go deeper and deeper and just, you just want to know. It's basically this entire like circle, I don't know if you call that the circle of life, but you're getting back to the basics, which is what are the things that really make me happy, or why am I don't know, moody, or what's happening, and trying to understand so you can basically just feel as great as possible every day with the simplest things.
But then to even think about that, I get going back to your story as well, like we both do that, and that's we've talked about this a lot. But to have to think about what makes me happy, to even have that thought, is because you ain't that happy, you know, and you go through some shit, and like building a business over 10 years is pretty brutal, and you have to change like how you behave with people, like what you spend your time on doing. You don't always do things you want to do, but to then come through the back end of it and spend a lot of time thinking what does make me happy is probably because that wasn't actually that fulfilling in the first place anyway. So that's a good insight.
I mean, me, to be honest, like if I think, I mean, now I'm just not thinking, which basically is probably a sign that I'm really feeling great. But to be honest, my 20s, building these businesses and doing all this investing stuff and hurting I don't think I was really happy, to be honest. I don't have any problem to say it. But my goal was this financial freedom thing, because I was like, I want to reach that before I get a family and all that stuff, because I want to be able to be at home or take care of the kids or whatever, if I have kids one day or whatever, be there for my family, be there mentally. But then I was like, man, like I have a girlfriend, I'm not there mentally. Like all the thing I want to get to is just the opposite happening in my life now. And I was just not happy. Like I was not happy. Like, but again, like they say, like you need to kind of make yourself feel miserable to get to these goals, so that all this money stuff is behind you, and then you can work on like the real stuff where you help people out and you think about yourself and all that stuff. So so the less you think, the more you're happy. Okay, awesome. That was awesome. Do you want to add anything? We've said enough. I think.
Don't add anything. I think that's okay. I mean, I'm trying to post more on my own social medias at the moment. Do a few e-com things. Try and share things as I learn and go. So if anyone is interested, they can follow me on social media.
Where do you post the most? You want to say like?
So I'm trying to set up a website and get everything sorted, but I haven't got that yet. So probably just my Instagram.
Instagram, which is
Jimmy Hill.
Jimmy Hill.
We changed the I for a 1. I'm sure you can put it in there.
We'll do that. Awesome. Thank you so much, man. That was
Cool,
awesome.
man.